The story begins with a sudden rift as Nardo, the leader of the hero party, unexpectedly banishes our protagonist, Eris Falray. Stunned by the sudden turn of events, Hero questioned if this was all just some kind of prank. Nardo's obvious fury confirmed this was no deception, as he clearly wanted Oris out of his presence immediately. Bystanders watched the intense argument unfold, curious about what had sparked the confrontation. Choosing to avoid the chaos, they kept their distance and retreated before the situation could spiral out of control. Nardo admitted that Eris's enhancement magic was effective, yet he still viewed her as a disposable asset, no different from a replaceable potion. Driven by a fit of uncontrollable rage, he insisted the party had no use for such a burden. Nardo went so far as to accuse Eris of being an experience hog. In this world, defeating monsters grants individuals experience points to increase their strength, which are typically distributed equally among all party members. Eris realized their true motive. They had expelled him simply to hoard more experience points for themselves. And as Eris attempted to explain, ignoring his protests entirely, Nardo made it clear the dismissal was final and sternly ordered him to leave. The other members also kept their distance, making it clear that he needed to read the room. Before finally walking away, Eris asked one last time if they were truly certain about his departure from the hero party. They mockingly noted his persistence, openly relieved that they would finally be rid of someone they considered dead weight. He cleared the path and continued strolling onward. He couldn't help but feel that the situation should have been self-explanatory. Despite his enchantments being the only thing keeping the party functional, they discarded him without ever realizing his true worth. He had always expected them to eventually come back for him with worried looks, but he was now firmly resolved never to return. Driven by a desire for vengeance against the demon lord who destroyed his family, Ares had joined the hero's party to prevent further tragedy. However, now that he was on his own, his main focus was simply getting his life back in order. With his future in mind, he decided to officially secure an adventurer's license. Upon reaching the guild house, he made his way over to the receptionist. She stepped forward and kindly offered her assistance. Following his arrest, he was presented with an offer to become an adventurer. After checking the time, she confirmed he had arrived just in time for the exam and asked how he wanted to proceed, to which he replied that he was ready to start immediately. She wasted no time in presenting him with a registration form to complete. He wasted no time recording his name and profession. As an enchanter, he supports his party using the innate enhancement magic he has possessed since birth. She proceeded to scan the completed form. She tentatively asked if he was part of the hero's party. While Eros noted how quickly she had identified him based on nothing more than his name and profession, he understood that if word of his expulsion from the hero's party ever got out, it would lead to significant complications. Thinking on his feet, Eris claimed his name was simply a common one, and insisted he had no ties to the hero's party. To shift her focus, he strategically inquired about the details of the upcoming exam. She clarified that the entire evaluation would consist of 4 separate tests. The examination was comprised of 4 distinct stages: a magic power test, target practice, a practical assessment, and the final exam. She further explained that he was required to successfully pass all 4 challenges. He was granted an infinite number of tries, along with a parting wish for his success. She then led the way, escorting him directly to the testing grounds. To start, she led him to the chamber specifically designated for the magic power test. Although this marked his first magic assessment since joining the hero party, Yura felt certain he would pass the test. Inside the room, a polished crystal was mounted atop a pedestal, and she reached out to place her hand against its surface. She demonstrated the procedure, explaining that touching the crystal would gauge his power level by absorbing a portion of his magic. The brightness of the light served as a direct indicator of one's magical capacity, with a brilliant glow representing immense power. As the crystal emitted a soft glow beneath her touch, Aureus inquired about the required passing score. She explained that the task was quite difficult for someone of her magic level, though making it just a bit brighter would be enough to earn her a passing grade. She pointed out that even as a non-adventurer, she could use a decent amount of magic, suggesting it should be easy for him. Hearing this, Eris placed his hand firmly on the crystal to test it out. The moment he made contact, the surface erupted with a brilliant glow. The sudden radiance briefly blinded the receptionist, leading Eris to assume the intense light was a clear sign he had passed the test. Turning to ask the receptionist about his results, he watched as her legs suddenly gave way, leaving him to wonder if he had somehow made a mistake. She quickly apologized for her sudden outburst, confessing that she had never seen anything quite like it before. After regaining her composure, she turned her focus back toward Eros' magic. As he continued to funnel his energy into the crystal, the stone began to radiate an overwhelming heat. He questioned whether the crystal could endure the strain or if it was at risk of breaking. She vouched for its resilience, noting that she had never heard of such a failure occurring before. To their absolute shock, the crystal began to show visible signs of fracturing. In an instant, it fractured and split into two distinct pieces. Observing the scene, Eris began to question its significance, while the receptionist collapsed to the floor once more, whispering to herself as she trembled with fear. Baffled by how the crystal could break when it was designed to withstand even S-rank magic, she began to suspect that Eris truly belonged to the hero's party. He quickly dismissed her doubts, arguing that a mage from the hero's party would have no reason to pursue the life of an ordinary adventurer. He offered her a hand up, though his primary concern was quickly asking about the results of her test. She put his mind at ease, confirming that he had undoubtedly passed the test. He apologized for the disruption, explaining that the shattered crystal made it impossible to continue any further testing for the time being. She pointed out how unexpected the situation was, criticizing the guild for failing to anticipate such an outcome as she began examining the shattered crystal. After she accidentally scraped her hand and began to bleed, Harris quickly took hold of it, noting that the injury was quite unremarkable. He offered to treat her wound with magic, and once the injury was swiftly healed, she was left stunned that Hurus possessed healing abilities on top of his existing magical prowess. While most people assumed enhancement magic was strictly for offense or defense, few understood its true purpose: imbuing things with specific properties. He immediately asked if there was any issue with a magic wielder like himself using healing magic, and she didn't raise any objections. He surprised her by offering to repair the crystal, and as she questioned if such a feat was even possible, he began channeling his healing magic into the fractures. The crystal began to visibly mend itself, and before long, it was fully restored to its original state. Seeing this incredible recovery, she expressed her sincere gratitude. Urus remained humble, admitting that he was the one who caused the damage in the first place. He inquired whether the next assessment would focus on target practice, and she confirmed that it was. The instructions were simple. He had to strike the target using either magic or a sword, with his score being determined by the sheer force of the impact. Upon reaching the next assessment site, the receptionist assured them that target practice would be easy with Eris's magic, though he quickly warned her not to expect much since he was primarily an enchantment mage. While he leaned into his role as a support, he privately maintained the belief that he could still clear the trial. A moment later, she led him to the testing grounds where a row of straw dummies had been laid out across the floor. She showcased the process by launching a magic orb at a target, noting that the intensity of its glow would reveal the attack's power. To pass the test, he needed to outperform his current attack power, with only the best of his 3 attempts being counted. She gave him the option to utilize either his sword or his magic for the assessment. He weighed the idea of using enhancement magic to augment a sword, but concluded that focusing purely on magic would render physical tools unnecessary. He noted that either choice would suffice, but opted for magic due to its convenience, leaving the receptionist taken aback by his indifference before she eventually agreed. He decided to cast Fireball, a basic introductory spell commonly available to those in support roles. With only 3 attempts at his disposal, he decided to lead with a beginner-level spell for his first try. For the second challenge, he remained focused on his strategy to secure a high score using an enchantment spell. He manifested a fireball far larger than necessary and sent it hurtling toward the target. He remarked that even the fireball had its limits, but the moment he turned around, Eros was taken aback by the receptionist's shocked expression as she described his power as overwhelming, claiming it had momentarily blinded her. However, he simply reassured her, noting that he hadn't even shown his full potential yet. Her shock deepened upon learning that he was still holding back his true power. The moment the haze from the previous impact finally dissipated, the receptionist was stunned by the sheer scale of the damage, noting that the explosion hadn't just obliterated the primary target, but had also swept through the surrounding dummies. Eris questioned whether the training dummies were meant to break, but after dismissing the thought, she decided to count the test as a success despite the damage. She informed him that the final 2 shots were unnecessary, as he had already passed the assessment with ease. Gesturing toward the ruined arena, she pointed out that the match couldn't proceed given the extent of the destruction. Without a word, Oris activated his healing magic to instantly repair the wreckage and restore the broken dummies. She remarked that while the exam could technically continue, it was now entirely unnecessary. Ultimately, Aorus successfully cleared the target practice exam with the use of just a single fireball. The practical exam came next, pitting him against a C-ranked examiner in a one-on-one duel. Only the participants who successfully cleared this stage earned the right to move on to the final exam. Starting at E rank, newcomers typically advance to D and C rank by completing guild requests and gaining field experience, as reaching C rank is the point where an adventurer is finally considered established. To pass the practical test, he had to earn the approval of an examiner who was a seasoned, professional adventurer. Entering the arena, he realized he wasn't the only one there, as a large crowd of other candidates had also gathered for the exam. The receptionist remarked that it was quite rare for someone of Ares's caliber to finish every exam within a single day. Elsewhere, the examiner Chris stood before the candidates and noted how much younger they seemed compared to him. After apologizing for the wait, he informed them that he would be their opponent for the practical exam. He explained that they could choose between swords or magic for the duel, which would continue until one side surrendered or was incapacitated, with their overall performance determining whether they passed or failed. He then boldly challenged them to approach him with the singular goal of achieving victory. Raising his hand, Ares questioned how the points would be evaluated, given that their success depended entirely on the performance of their tools. Chris clarified that the exam was designed to simulate real-world requests, serving as a test to determine if the candidates were prepared for the final assessment. The assessment would measure their basic compatibility, crisis management, and situational judgment, though Ares couldn't help but feel the criteria were far too ambiguous. Unsatisfied with the response but undeterred, he pressed on, asking if defeating Chris would guarantee that he passed. With a confident scoff, Chris asserted that he would pass as long as he proved his capabilities. He further noted that while utilizing the guarantee pass, he had remained undefeated against every aspiring candidate who dared to make such a claim. Hearing this, Ares reflected on his experience as a support member of the hero's party, and while he expected a difficult fight, he remained confident that he wouldn't lose. He found reassurance in the fact that a victory would guarantee his success. Chris then summoned the first candidate in line, inviting her to step forward and begin the challenge. As the girl moved ahead, Ares felt a surge of relief. By avoiding an immediate confrontation, he finally had the breathing room needed to refine his strategy. As the battle unfolded, the girl's skillful use of magic impressed Ares, making him realize she possessed incredible potential for someone her age. Chris focused his mind and began to prepare himself. Ares realized he was tracking the flow of her magic, enabling him to expertly redirect her strike. Chris lunged toward the candidate at full speed, causing the girl to tremble visibly as he approached. Ares was left wondering if she had truly failed to anticipate such a complete disaster. While her abilities far surpassed those of her peers, her growing ego ultimately led to her undoing. In an instant, Chris closed the gap and held his position at her throat, forcing her to surrender immediately. Chris critiqued her performance, noting that while her attack was undeniably powerful, her failure to land the opening blow left her completely vulnerable to the counterattack. Chris bluntly stated that her current skill level wasn't enough to earn a passing grade. He advised her to return only after she had significantly refined her skills, leaving her to depart the venue in tears. Next in line, Ares stepped forward to take her turn in the competition. Reviewing the form, Chris was taken aback to find an enhancement mage among the examinees. Ares was well aware that enhancement mages were a rare find among ordinary adventurers. Divine professions tended to be far more niche than the standard paths of spellcasting or swordsmanship followed by the masses. This world featured a diverse array of rare professions, including enhancement mages, healers, and unique classes dedicated to specialized skills. Chris openly questioned whether enhancement magic could truly be considered a legitimate form of sorcery. Ares confirmed his intention to use it, noting that he was currently without a sword. Chris then informed Ares of a rule she had clearly overlooked. Candidates were prohibited from using their own swords or staves and were required to borrow equipment from the guild instead. He elaborated that a sword's combat potential varies significantly based on its specific classification. To ensure a level playing field, both the candidates and the examiners are required to use swords provided by the guild. After hearing this, Ares decided to borrow a sword from the guild. Chris promptly signaled the receptionist to bring over an additional one. He admitted he had never seen anyone combine magic and swordsmanship before, officially dubbing Ares a magic swordsman, but cautioned that this versatility would be worthless if his skills remained unpolished. Once the receptionist provided the sword and the match began, Chris gave Ares the chance to strike first whenever he felt ready. Ares noticed that Chris was once again willing to let him take the opening blow, though he felt that winning through a surprise attack would be hollow. He opted for a more measured approach, keeping his opening strike cautious and controlled. To begin, he cast 4 enhancement spells on himself, boosting his movement, attack speed, power, and accuracy. Next, he proceeded to apply enhancement magic to his sword as well. Chris was stunned to witness Uras's mastery and his ability to enchant his sword, just as Uras accelerated toward the examiner with incredible speed. Using a tactical approach, he cast 4 devitalizing spells on both Chris and his sword. He immediately weakened Chris with multiple debuffs, slowing his movement and attack speed, while also reducing his overall power and accuracy. Stunned by Uras' overwhelming power, Chris felt as though his body and blade were weighed down by a mountain, unable to process how everything had changed so rapidly. Moving with blinding speed, Eris managed to land a precise strike. Instead of striking Chris, the blow knocked off his wig, leaving it discarded on the ground. As the onlookers watched in bewilderment, the man realized this sudden turn of events was now completely beyond his control. Standing directly behind Chris, Eris offered a sincere apology for his sudden actions, and though Chris's voice and body were visibly trembling, he quickly insisted there was no need to worry, leaving Eris feeling guilty for the embarrassment he'd caused. Determined to give his all in this high-stakes duel, he activated his step enhancement magic, swiftly manifesting a magic circle to channel its energy into his feet. Moving with blinding speed, he seemed to vanish instantly, leaving Chris struggling to process their sudden disappearance. Appearing silently behind Chris Nape, Eris pressed the cold blade against him, signaling the end of the match and securing his victory. Chris accepted his defeat with poise, leaving the other candidates speechless after witnessing a display of power so immense that even the examiner was forced to concede. They were left questioning the identity of this mysterious newcomer, who had managed to effortlessly overpower a C-rank examiner. Chris and Horace took a moment to formally introduce themselves to each other. Chris questioned if he was truly the enchanter from the Heroes Party, but Eris was quick to deny it. Chris questioned whether a member of the Heroes Party was truly meant to undergo their exams in such a fashion. At that moment, they found themselves staring intently at Chris's gleaming bald head. Eris attempted to apologize, but Chris quickly brushed the concern aside, recognizing that the mistake was purely accidental. In that moment, Eris offered to instantly regrow his hair, catching Chris off guard as he questioned if such a feat was actually possible. Without a second thought, Eris placed his hand on Chris's head, and the effect was instantaneous. Chris watched in stunned silence as his baldness was suddenly replaced by a thick growth of dark hair. Clearly moved by the situation, Chris expressed his sincere thanks. He immediately passed Auris on his assessment, fast-tracking him straight to the final test. Soon after, Auris arrived at the northeastern island forest near Bergam Village, the official site for his final exam, which was a collection quest. Earlier, the receptionist had tasked him with gathering 20 vitality herbs for potion production. Constrained by a strict 5-hour limit, he had the option to either avoid battles entirely or engage enemies while efficiently gathering the required herbs. Vitality herbs were the core component for potions that restored health and mana, typically flourishing in high-rank hunting grounds where the magical energy was most concentrated. Hare reflected that gathering 20 herbs in just 5 hours was a daunting task for an E-rank adventurer, but the receptionist's promise of a reward pushed him to do his best. Eris welcomed the opportunity, as she never turned down a chance to increase her earnings. Despite being classified as a high-rank zone, the monsters within the Issel forest were generally manageable for a solo adventurer. As he ventured deeper into the woods, he came across nearly 10 groups of creatures, making him confident that gathering 20 would be an easy task until a green entity suddenly emerged. A fierce rat-like creature lunged at him with incredible speed, but Eris quickly realized that despite its low defense, its venomous fangs made its offensive power exceptionally dangerous. Eris suddenly sent the rat tumbling with a powerful kick, and since higher intelligence often leads to a sharper sense of self-preservation, the other monsters watching her wisely chose to retreat. This would undoubtedly make the task much simpler for Russus. Once he finished gathering all the necessary herbs, he departed the area and began his journey back to the guild. A girl's piercing cry for help suddenly echoed through the air, prompting Aros to venture further and investigate the source of the noise. He discovered a young girl being ambushed by a pack of menacing blue wolves, a situation made worse by the lack of clear territory markers that often hindered solo adventurers from scouting effectively. Without warning, a wolf lunged at Celia, catching her wrist in its sharp fangs. With her defenses completely shattered, Celia realized her inefficient equipment was now failing her entirely. She frantically reached out, trying to get her hands on a healing potion. However, her grip faltered, and it slipped from her hands to the ground. Baring their sharp fangs, the ferocious beasts positioned themselves to strike. He lunged at her without warning, sending her flying backward until she crashed into a tree. Celia strained to reach the discarded healing potion, but it remained just out of her grasp. Just as a wolf loomed over her, poised to strike, Eris found he could no longer stand by and watch, even though stealing experience points was a strict taboo among adventurers. Although Eris had initially resolved to stay out of the conflict, he could no longer stand by while Celia remained so vulnerable. With effortless precision, he applied a series of potent enchantments specifically designed for women, drastically increasing her defense, magic resistance, healing capabilities, and overall speed. He strategically cast debuffs on the aggressive creatures, effectively slowing their movements while reducing both their power and accuracy. After finishing his self-enhancements, he prepared to act just as the wolves lunged toward her. Celia instinctively closed her eyes in dread, but as she cautiously opened them again, She was stunned to see a stranger fighting the wolves by her side, while Iris calmly advised her to stay close to him as the threat still lingered. He realized that the fundamental purpose of buff magic was to grant specific properties, meaning most of its effects could be replicated. This meant that enhancement magic could also be effectively weaponized for offensive maneuvers. Iris courageously summoned an imposing magic circle to unleash the power of prominence. He wiped out the entire wolf pack in an instant, leaving Celia completely speechless. The surviving wolves quickly fled the area, after which Eris gently pulled her away from the lingering flames to ensure her safety. He warned her of the severe consequences should she be caught in the crossfire. But Eris found the close proximity to be quite distracting. Despite his flushing face, he managed to maintain his composure. He understood that he couldn't afford any distractions during the crisis, and shortly after they had successfully escaped the immediate threat, Celia bowed before him, expressing her sincere gratitude for his timely intervention, though Eris simply dismissed the act as a minor matter. Celia felt that was a massive understatement, prompting her to ask if he was actually a high-ranking adventurer. To her surprise, he explained that he wasn't an official adventurer yet, noting that he would only earn the title once he delivered the herbs back to the guild. He then questioned why Celia was alone in such a dangerous location, pointing out that lacking sufficient power could easily prove fatal for a solo adventurer. Her initial hesitation soon vanished, replaced by a firm resolve as she announced her goal of becoming a hero. He asked if she wanted to join a hero's party, and her face lit up with excitement as she gave him her answer. Ever since a hero saved her life, she had looked up to them as her ultimate source of inspiration. She revealed that her strategy involved hunting high-level monsters to maximize her experience gains. Having nearly lost her life to her own impulsiveness, she began to deeply reflect on her reckless actions. Eris then explained that the swordsman position within the hero's party had already been filled. She noted that the journey ahead would be a thorny one for anyone on that path, but Celia quickly reassured him, as she wasn't a swordsman herself. He remarked on the fact that she was wielding a sword despite not actually being a swordsman. Celia immediately clarified that her path didn't follow any conventional job type, firmly believing that a rare and unique class was destined to manifest for her. She then eagerly shared that she was, in fact, a sword saint. Meanwhile, across town in the southeastern part of Burgum village, the scene shifts to the Gerald soldier's tomb. Eris's former party was amazed by the sudden increase in experience points they were receiving, noting how efficient it was to boost their gains simply by removing a member. Nardo spoke with total conviction, certain that they would eventually recoup the cost of the potions. The others noted that enhancement magic was easily replaceable with common potions, confirming their belief that removing Oris from the group had been the right choice. Afterward, the group works together to take down a savage wyvern. Meanwhile, several members noted that the monster appeared to be significantly more resilient than usual. They found it difficult to keep up their momentum while facing the creature's overwhelming strength. Faced with the enemy's overwhelming power and resilience, one of the members handed out strength potions to help the group fight back. Meanwhile, Nardo shouted out, commanding them to take the fight against the monster seriously, following their combined efforts and several persistent attempts. After an arduous battle, the party finally succeeded in taking down the wyvern. Narda confidently noted that they were more than capable of taking down a powerful opponent single-handedly. He insisted that this particular wyvern's immense strength was nothing more than a coincidence. He ordered them to maintain their momentum, but the others could only exchange uneasy looks, hesitant to speak out of turn in Nardo's presence. Meanwhile, Celia spoke with great energy as she detailed the specifics of her unusual profession to Arrest. She explained that the Sword Saint was a peerless, one-of-a-kind class, representing the ultimate evolution for any swordsman. Convinced that hard work could make her a hero, she dedicated herself to a relentless grind for experience points. In turn, Eris clarified that the reality of being a hero was far from the glamorous ideal many imagined. However, he soon realized that this power came with a heavy price. Celia acknowledged the heavy burden of being a hero, but her resolve to adventure with Eris was so strong that she felt she had no choice but to become one herself. Harris's breath caught in his throat as he heard her speak his name with such casual ease. He was caught completely off guard when his name was suddenly brought up in the middle of the conversation. Harris questioned her motives, asking why she was so determined to set out on an adventure with him. Celia nonchalantly admitted her feelings and proposed they set off on an adventure together to grow closer, prompting Eros to respond with a gentle laugh. He quickly reassured her that he wasn't making fun of her dreams. He voiced his skepticism, wondering how she could trust him so easily after such a brief encounter. She reminded him that he had put his own life on the line just to save hers. She went on to recount a haunting memory from 3 years ago, when the Demon King's forces invaded her home village of Ruria. After taking her captive, the demon immediately decided to eliminate her, dismissing her as too inexperienced to be of any use. Right as she stood on the brink of death, a party of heroes arrived just in time to rescue her. One hero even reached out, offering her a helping hand. Returning to the present, Eris remembered saving a young girl in Ruria village during a brief stop with the heroes' party. Realizing with certainty that he had rescued Celia from the Rangit family, Silly watched him with an intense and unwavering gaze. She questioned him, curious about how he had come to know such specific details. Upon closer inspection, she recognized his striking resemblance to the boy from 3 years ago, finally realizing that Eros was the same legendary hero from back then. Harris realized his cover was blown the moment Silly questioned why a member of the hero's party was participating in the adventurer's exam. Eris calmly explained that he had been suddenly dismissed from the hero's party. He had become a simple aspiring adventurer, yet Celia seemed genuinely thrilled by the development. She was caught off guard when she suddenly came face to face with her savior. Overwhelmed by the moment, she instinctively embraced Ares, the person she had been waiting so long to meet. He then asked if she was truly serious about teaming up with him. Celia declared with firm resolve that it would suit her perfectly, and witnessing her determination, Arust realized she truly intended to stay. Upon reaching the guild house, the receptionist was taken aback by their unexpectedly early arrival. She then turned her attention to the vitality herbs, asking for more information. In an instant, Aorus called forth his inventory portal. He showcased his collection of herbs and defeated creatures with a flourish, subtly hinting that she should take the opportunity to purchase some of the materials. The receptionist was stunned by the sight of the inventory portal and immediately questioned its origin. But the situation was far from simple. Horace stood his ground, refusing to disclose the information. He dismissed it as a company secret, but in reality, it was his item slot skill, which utilized enhancement magic to open a gateway to another dimension. This byproduct was an unintended result of his attempt to manipulate space and time using speed magic. However, since no one else could open it, the item remained effectively useless to the rest of the hero party. The receptionist asked him to wait a moment while she finalized the transaction. She went on to congratulate him for his success in passing the adventurer exam. She handed him his new guild ID card, reminding him to keep it safe and secure. Obtaining a replacement would be a costly process, requiring a significant fee of 10,000 jewels. Seely stepped in at that moment, expressing her intention to form a new party. After finalizing their party registration, Eris and Silly departed from the old house, with Silly suggesting a quick stop at the neighboring diner before they returned home. Eris then admitted that he had nowhere to stay for the night. Consequently, finding a place to stay became a matter of immediate urgency. With a casual air, Celia suggested he stay at the same inn where she was already residing. Aris attempted to explain that while sharing a room with another man wouldn't be an issue, he was worried about the potential complications of them staying together. Despite his explanation, she remained completely oblivious, looking at him with wide, innocent eyes as she asked if he would like to share a room with her. Finding her genuine innocence impossible to resist, he decided to head toward the diner for the time being. Before long, they arrived at the diner and were served an array of delicious dishes. Staring at the massive portions, Eris questioned if she could actually finish it all. She reassured him that there was no need for concern, as she actually had a massive appetite. Skeptical, he asked if she was genuinely serious about letting him stay in her room. She readily agreed, looking delighted at the prospect of enjoying such a large meal and staying the night with her favorite person. Although she eventually realized the portion was too large for her appetite, Eris stepped in and offered to finish her leftovers. He reassured her that she didn't need to push herself so hard. Eris then began eating, using the exact same spoon as her companion. Her expression shifted the moment she realized they'd shared an indirect kiss. And as he noticed her bewildered state and asked if she was okay, she desperately tried to convince him she was fine. Upon arriving at her room, Urus noted that her living space was quite decent, prompting Silly to offer her own response. She had carefully selected this specific inn after exploring several other options, and seeing how spacious the room was, he noted there was plenty of space for him to rest comfortably. As he began spreading a sheet across the floor, she stopped to ask what he was doing. She advised him to rest in a proper cot, warning that he would only make himself sick otherwise. Flustered by her bluntness, Ores struggled to explain the obvious complications of a man and woman sharing a single cot. When she looked at him with a pleading expression and softly asked if he truly disliked resting with her, Heros found himself unable to refuse and ultimately gave in to her request. He settled onto the same cot as her, but found himself feeling incredibly self-conscious with her resting so close to him. Silly let out a soft giggle, remarking that his uneven breath was tickling her neck, which caused him to quickly turn his head away. The cramped space of the cot kept her pressed firmly against him, causing his face to turn a deep shade of red. The following morning, Ares was seen pushing himself through an intense workout, fully aware that the intricate skills of an enchanter weren't mastered in a single day. These tasks required both physical endurance and deep expertise, with ancient spellbooks and specialized nets serving as vital tools. Celia woke up just then, offering a cheerful morning greeting and asking why he was already out of bed. Eris explained that he was simply finishing his daily routine, having just completed 1,000 reps each of push-ups, sit-ups, and squats. His grueling daily routine left her stunned, leading her to ask if he truly maintained such a demanding schedule every day. He offhandedly wondered if this was a common routine for everyone, though she was quick to inform him otherwise. This led him to realize that the heroes from his former party had fundamentally misunderstood the meaning of true efficiency. Looking worried, she reminded him that while training is essential, he shouldn't push himself to such dangerous extremes. Eris made his intentions clear, vowing to do whatever it takes to defeat the Demon King and finally earn a peaceful life. He explained that defeating the Demon King would cause the surrounding magical energy to vanish, finally putting an end to their constant fighting. Although the atmosphere here posed no threat to humans, it served as a catalyst for awakening a wide array of monsters. The Demon King used his barriers to amplify the magical energy, ultimately driving the monsters into a state of madness. Ironically, Orest realized that the only way to avoid future conflict was to become significantly stronger. Celia acknowledged that while everyone desires a peaceful life, she questioned whether his massive ambitions were truly within his reach. Eris found herself agreeing, though she still struggled to fully process everything based on that explanation alone. He then began recounting a story from 6 years prior. A gorilla dungeon had unexpectedly materialized right in the heart of their village. Unlike standard dungeons, failing to clear this one by sunset would cause a relentless tide of monsters to overflow from its depths. Back then, his parents were distinguished A-rank adventurers, who entrusted him with the village's evacuation, refusing to let him join the fray since he had yet to become an adventurer himself. Despite his parents' immense power, he was plagued by a sense of unease that day. It just so happened to be his 13th birthday, a day his parents had promised they would all celebrate together. As the sun set, the dungeon remained uncleared, and the continuous surge of monsters led to even more casualties among the adventurers. Even as a young child, Eris fully grasped the tragedy of his parents' fate and vowed to grow strong enough to avenge them. Silly thought back to the gorilla dungeon incident in the city, feeling relieved that he had managed to survive the attack. The hero insisted that these tragedies would keep occurring until the Demon King was defeated, vowing to prevent further disasters at any cost. He offered another apology for dampening the mood, but Silly insisted that the topic was far too important to ignore. Still, Eurus felt there was little to be gained by letting the past hold him back. She suggested grabbing a meal before heading to the guild, while Celia offered a warm smile and advised him to accept a quest as soon as they arrived. Upon reaching the guild, Eurus Khan explained that defeating the Demon King would be impossible without seamless teamwork and a focused effort to increase the party's overall power. Prioritizing Celia's growth, he selected a quest that would take him to a specific region. Celia asked him if he'd managed to find any quests that seemed like a good fit. Stealing her resolve, Arissa handed her the quest letter. The mission was a request to eliminate a group of monstrous birds. She admitted she was uncertain about how much assistance she could actually offer for that specific quest. He made it clear that the day's quest had been tailored specifically for her. While it might be a struggle for Celia, the experience points she stood to gain would be substantial. She showed hesitation toward the quest, explaining that her attacks lacked the range to strike the birds. When he questioned whether she truly couldn't strike down flying enemies with a sword, she insisted that doing so was impossible from any angle. Observing her unwavering resolve, Aura realized that the girl was often held back by her own strict principles, and to fully awaken her talent as a sword saint, she would need to break through those personal barriers. He wasted no time offering to teach her a straightforward method to complete the quest. Later that day, they reached South Road 227 near Belva Village, where Eris volunteered to show them the technique in action. As a massive bird lunged toward them, he remained composed, guiding her to channel magic into the blade, compress the energy, and visualize it amplifying as she swung. Celia was left stunned by his demonstration of power, but he still had plenty of surprises left to reveal. Shortly after, he fired a concentrated beam of magic toward the sky, decimating the surrounding area before standing his ground to declare his convictions. It appeared she was capable of matching that performance, but she adamantly shook her head to deny it. He found himself questioning how such an occurrence was even possible. He handed the sword back, but she found it surprisingly difficult to get a firm grip on her first try. He explained that the secret was to relax her shoulders, allowing her magic to flow seamlessly with every swing of her sword. Taking the advice to heart, Celia attempted to swing her sword, though her movements were awkward and lacked polish. Observing this, Iris stepped closer and gripped her hands, suggesting they practice the motions together. The interaction left Celia visibly flustered, and though he noticed her rigid behavior and asked if something was wrong, she quickly dismissed him to refocus on her training. Issuing a swift command, he directed her to synchronize her breathing and amplify her magic with a steady rhythm. A powerful beam of magic erupted from her sword, striking the massive bird and taking it down instantly. Aris encouraged her to keep the rhythm steady and attempt the solo next, prompting her to try the section on her own. Although her strikes consistently failed to connect, he urged her to stay focused and keep giving it her all. Even though her initial strikes missed their targets, Celia's relentless practice soon allowed her to master the technique effortlessly, causing her success rate to surge. A short time later, only a single monster remained before their quest was officially complete. All the while, Eris continued to praise her for her remarkable abilities as a sword saint. He warned her to remain vigilant and keep her guard up until the very last moment. Aris remained on standby to intervene if necessary, but it appeared the group was set to finish their quest without any complications. At that moment, his gaze was immediately drawn towards something else. That was when Silly briefed him on the details regarding the magical birds. They were now in the process of fleeing the scene entirely. Their flight seemed far too chaotic to be caused by Celia alone, especially since these magical birds rarely break formation unless they are facing a much greater threat. At that exact moment, a massive distortion materialized before them. Celia was caught completely off guard, leading her to anxiously ask what she could possibly do to handle the situation. Eris remained completely unfazed, calmly noting that his final target had finally appeared before him. After seeing Celia effortlessly dispatch the magical birds with single strikes, he felt certain her current strength was enough to defeat the wyvern on her own. Yet he remained gripped by a profound sense of anxiety. She questioned whether he really expected her to face the massive creature alone, but he calmly reasoned that its size made it a much easier target than the smaller birds. Silly quickly recognized that this was a far easier target to handle. Her resolve faltered the instant she laid eyes on the creature's menacing fangs. Noticing her growing distress, Eris stepped in to try and help her regain her composure. She stood her ground and firmly declared that her new techniques and recent battle experience had fully prepared her to take down the creature. She quickly steadied herself, regaining her composure in an instant. She resolved to give it one last attempt. With another strike, a magical beam erupted once more, piercing straight through the creature's thick scales. Celia watched in disbelief, stunned that she had managed to take down the massive beast entirely on her own. Without a second thought, she pulled Eris into an embrace to thank him for his guidance, though he humbly downplayed his contribution. After simply demonstrating the technique, he encouraged Celia to place more trust in her own abilities. He suggested they return to the village, but she affectionately teased him for being humble, as he didn't seem to realize just how invaluable his help had been. A short while later, they arrived back at the guild to inform the receptionist that their quest was officially complete. He appeared quite taken by Aerospace's level of efficiency and their mastery of time management. However, he admitted that he hadn't actually engaged in any combat during the entire quest. Contrary to expectations, Celia had single-handedly defeated the magic birds using only her sword. He clarified that he had only watched her performance from the sidelines, insisting that the success was hers alone. The receptionist remained skeptical, finding it hard to believe that Celia could have defeated a swarm of magic birds with nothing but her sword. Celia stepped forward and revealed that she had mastered a remarkable new spell under Eris's guidance. She offered further praise, noting that he possessed a remarkable talent for teaching, capable of making the impossible a reality. Ares had only intended to support Celia from the shadows, never expecting her to boast about him so boldly in front of the receptionist. Flustered by her enthusiastic praise, he quickly shifted the conversation to report that their quest was finally complete. Without hesitation, she began inspecting the materials that had just been delivered. Despite her concern that an item was missing, he calmly reassured her and immediately produced the final material. It was the massive wyvern Celia had previously defeated, and the sight of such a formidable beast appearing right before her eyes left the receptionist completely stunned. He began to question whether this was truly the same wyvern Celia had defeated. Ares seemed sincerely perplexed, questioning if his appearance was truly that shocking to her. Without missing a beat, she admitted that the revelation had genuinely shocked her. The wyvern was considered one of the most formidable magical beasts, posing a significant challenge even to seasoned B-rank adventurers. Eris was genuinely taken aback, having remained oblivious to the true extent of his own power. Because the hero party had dispatched such monsters so effortlessly, the receptionist had simply assumed the entire group was exceptionally strong. But right then, he inquired whether the wyvern materials would sell for a high price, and the receptionist confirmed they would provide a substantial boost to their earnings. She promptly scanned the waiver to assess its terms. While finalizing the quest records, she also retrieved their guild ID cards. With the task finished, their quest completion points rose to 30 out of 100. and they were granted a single guild point for their success. She further explained that he would ascend to the next rank once he accumulated 10 points. By consistently completing quests and gathering points, individuals could eventually elevate their adventurer rank. Silly then questioned whether they could raise their level simply by completing easier quests. The receptionist assured him that it wouldn't be an issue. She explained that to move forward, they would need to complete at least one quest from every rank tier. This served as a safeguard, ensuring that unworthy adventurers could never ascend to the higher ranks. The receptionist quickly pointed out that, given their extraordinary power, they were far too skilled to remain in the E rank. At that moment, the appraisal process reached its conclusion. She was visibly stunned after seeing such a massive figure listed. She revealed that the reward for their quest amounted to 50,000 jewels. Furthermore, the base price for the item itself would cost an additional 50,000 jewels. As the two stepped out of the guild house, Silly's anxiety was clear. She was overwhelmed by the massive sum of money and terrified of becoming a target for thieves. Eris calmly reassured her that they could simply hunt for more if needed. But Silly pointed out with a worried expression that it was Eris's own hard-earned money. After hearing the news, Eris proposed they divide the 50,000 gold commission among themselves, while the full reward for the wyverns would go entirely to Celia. He remembered how his former party members were constantly arguing over the division of their rewards. Eris aimed to be completely fair with the distribution since Celia had defeated the wyverns single-handedly, but Celia insisted that she hadn't fought the battle alone. Insisting that they couldn't have succeeded without him, she argued he deserved the full reward, leading Oris to comment on her kindness. He gently suggested holding on to the funds for the time being, and after tucking the pouch into his inventory, he explained that he would use the gold to buy Celia a suitable weapon. She unsheathed her blade and remarked that it was a fairly solid weapon. Eris assumed the blade was just a standard market find, though he clarified that while it was a quality weapon, this fell short of unleashing the sword sync's true potential, and she would soon discover its many limitations. He suggested they secure a superior sword in advance, leaving Celia impressed by his foresight. He pointed out that the 100,000 jewels they'd earned were enough to commission a custom-made sword. Hearing this, Silly beamed with excitement and asked if it was a gift, but he clarified that it was actually a reward for her hard work. Meanwhile, Aoris's former party struggled to maintain their pace, finally realizing that expelling him had been a grave mistake. Although one member tried to mitigate the situation with her potions and healing skills, her efforts weren't nearly enough to counter the severe damage the team was enduring. The rest of the group began to wonder if Urus had been covertly weakening the monsters even while providing them with buffs. However, another person pointed out that they had never heard of such an ability before. They reflected on how they had once cast Eris out without a moment's hesitation. After Nardo silenced him, the group realized that Eris had actually been trying to share something vital before his expulsion. It finally dawned on them that Ioris had been quietly supporting them from the shadows this entire time. One member even admitted that had she known the truth sooner, she never would have let Nardo convince her to banish Eris. Nardo suddenly lunged forward and grabbed her shirt, denouncing her as a hypocrite who had been secretly plotting behind the scenes. She had completely shifted her perspective, now treating him as if he were the antagonist. He argued that since the entire group had agreed to Eris's expulsion, they were all equally responsible for the decision. Shaking with emotion, she offered her apologies, but Nardo insisted they stop looking back and focus on the path ahead. Turning to more pressing matters, he asked about their stock of healing potions, only for her to explain that the monthly budget had already been exhausted. Without a moment's hesitation, he ordered her to return to the store and buy more. She disclosed that repairing the gear damaged in yesterday's intense battle would cost 800,000 jewels, warning that such high expenses could make it impossible to afford next month's rent. Nardo paused briefly before stating that as a former companion who had traveled by their side, Eris would not be turned away if he chose to rejoin the party. Having personally cast Urus out, Nardo refused to show any vulnerability to his comrades, fearing that losing face would cause the group's power hierarchy to shift against him. The rest of the group accepted his sudden decision immediately, offering little to no resistance. Nardo also gave his word that he would personally ask Aris to return if their paths ever crossed again. Meanwhile, one girl expressed her conviction that Eros would never return after being banished in such a way, though the other members quickly silenced her. They pointed out that Nardo's change of heart was a significant breakthrough in itself. Furthermore, he noted that without official adventurer credentials, he was no longer permitted to take on requests. They were certain he would eventually be forced to return, assuming he lacked the means to survive or find new allies. However, they remained oblivious to the fact that Urus had already formed a new party with his dependable partner, Celia. Meanwhile, at the armory, the staff turned Aris away, explaining that they only sold standard inventory and weren't equipped to handle custom orders. Silly reflected on the 50,000 jewels she earned from defeating the wyvern, realizing that even such a large sum wasn't enough to commission a custom sword. Eris recommended seeking out the weapon merchants in the capital, yet his thoughts unexpectedly drifted toward New York. Bystanders nearby were heard discussing a dwarf who had recently turned down a job offer worth a fortune in jewels, leaving them baffled about what it would actually take to sway his decision. In this world, the dwarves were legendary for their unmatched craftsmanship, and Eris recalled hearing tales of a specific master artisan back during his days with the hero's party. Wasting no time, Aura stepped toward the group to ask for more details. Noting that Eris seemed strangely familiar, the man asked if his companion was also curious about the master dwarf. Oris enthusiastically confirmed her request, stating that she wanted a powerful, custom-made sword. The man explained they had also come in search of high-quality weapons, but the stubborn old dwarf had flatly refused their request. They also clarified that the dwarf's only condition was that he would exclusively craft items for those he deemed worthy. Acceptance was determined entirely by one's proficiency in swordsmanship. But then everything changed. Eris produced a map and asked if they could pinpoint his current location. The man then pointed decisively toward a specific location on the map. Realizing the workshop was nearby, Celie decided to head there immediately, but her plans were interrupted when her stomach let out a loud growl, causing her to blush as she tried to excuse the awkward noise. However, he ultimately decided it would be better to wait and head to the workshop the following day. He also urged her not to overexert herself while she was so hungry. Unexpectedly, a young girl named Sherrit stumbled into a burly man and scraped her knee, yet she didn't pause for even a moment. Ares rushed to her side and healed her injury in a single moment. Sherrit looked on in disbelief as her injured knee was restored, quickly voicing her appreciation before making a hasty exit. Celie tried to compliment his kindness, but she was quickly mortified when her stomach growled loudly once again. Eris's quiet laughter only fueled her frustration, leading her to reprimand him for his lack of manners. The following morning, they reached the workshop of the notorious dwarf, Gale, and proceeded to knock on the sturdy gate. A short, elderly man stepped forward, demanding to know what business they had there. Apologizing for the surprise visit, Eris introduced himself and explained that he was in search of a master craftsman. Gale shook his head in disbelief, noting that Eris was simply another adventurer in pursuit of a weapon. Eris explained their intent to commission a sword for Celia, but Gale immediately questioned if she was truly worthy of his personal craftsmanship. First, he requested to take a look at the weapon she was currently wielding. He carefully examined her blade, noting that while her potential was undeniable, her actual technique still lacked refinement. He was convinced that entrusting his sword to someone unqualified would only lead to the misuse of its power, leaving Celie to accept the situation with a somber expression. She realized she needed to further refine her skills before she could consider returning, especially after witnessing how easily the others had given up. Gale expressed surprise that they hadn't tried to bribe their way in after being rejected, but Eris noted that he didn't strike her as the type of person who could be swayed by gold. Furthermore, he lacked the funds required to buy their way inside. Gale appreciated the transparency, but his mind was already made up, just as Sherrit appeared to ask if her grandfather was sending away more adventurers empty-handed. Shortly after, she crossed paths with Aris and Celia, taking a moment to thank them once more for their vital assistance the previous day. Confused, Gale asked if he recognized them, and Sherrit confirmed that he did. Shortly after, the full sequence of events from the previous day was finally revealed. Aris expressed his disbelief that the child they rescued was actually his granddaughter, noting that they had also finally begun to break through Gale's guarded exterior. His demeanor seemed to soften slightly once he learned about the events of the previous day. Gale admitted that they weren't the villains he had initially taken them for. He offered to hand over his sword immediately, a gesture that clearly delighted Celia. Sherrit clarified that her grandfather's primary concern was preventing anyone from misusing his collection of prized swords. Gale also warned that if an adventurer lacked strength, a villain could easily strip them of their sword. He then laid out 3 essential conditions that they would have to follow. First, Eris would undergo intense training to fully master Celia's swordsmanship. Next, he would take up a blade personally crafted by Gale. He learned that Gale intended to forge a custom sword for him, alongside the one being made for Celia. Eris continued to press him for more information. Gale wasted no time in offering his assessment, naming Eris as the most skilled combatant while noting that Celia held the greatest future potential. Eris attempted to clarify that he was a spellcaster rather than a swordsman, but Gale remained unmoved, asserting that such titles held no weight with him. He explained that as long as they remained pure and powerful swordsmen, it would fulfill his ultimate ambition as a craftsman. Eris then inquired about the final requirement, noting that it involved gold. Gale brushed him off, noting that his current wealth was already more than sufficient. Finally, he laid out the last condition, requiring them to return with over a kilo of spirit stones. Before long, Eris and Cilia found themselves deep within the Bergam forest, a dense woodland famously known as the Forest of Spirits. Eris noted that Gale had certainly established the most demanding conditions for their final challenge. Throughout that forest, spirit energy gradually gathered within the various magical creatures living there. At the absolute summit of the food chain, the carnivores were the most numerous. Cilia cautiously struck down the monsters, allowing Ares to inspect the stones they left behind. He noted with frustration that even the larger creatures only provided 30% of the required yield, while Cilia reminded him that encountering the strongest monsters was entirely a matter of chance. Ares advised that their search would require patience, but Cilia jokingly wondered if the monsters might just come to them instead. Hearing those words, a sudden plan immediately began to take shape in his mind. He declared their plan to lure the most powerful monster out using bait. When she inquired about the bait, he calmly revealed that he would be the one taking the role, leaving Cilia completely stunned. In a risky gamble, Eris decided to act as live bait by carefully fluctuating his magical output, hoping the unstable energy would lure in any nearby predators. Eris reasoned that by suppressing a massive surge of magic and then unleashing it all at once, he could force the forest's largest beast out of hiding. Eris put his plan into motion immediately, and just as he had foreseen, the forest's most dangerous monster finally emerged. The ground trembled beneath its thunderous footsteps, and seeing Celia's terror, Eris quickly covered her mouth to ensure she remained silent. As the colossal, nightmarish creature fully revealed itself, Cilia was paralyzed by overwhelming fear. Eris casually noted that given the beast's massive proportions, they would likely obtain an exceptionally large spirit stone. Known as the Behemoth, this carnivorous predator reigned supreme over the entire forest. He was now facing a formidable opponent, one that even his former party had failed to defeat during his time as a hero. Eris quickly formulated a strategy, instructing Cilia to dodge immediately after the next strike, while he moved in to draw the creature's attention. He quickly manifested a magic circle behind him to draw the monster's attention, causing the enraged beast to lunge toward him. Across the field, Cilia released a concentrated beam of magic, striking the brute with pinpoint accuracy. Eris barked a sharper command for her to evade, while simultaneously manifesting a wind arrow with his potent magic. To overcome the behemoth's natural earth affinity, Cilia and Eris merged their magical energies and struck the creature with a devastating combined attack. With the beast lying defeated at their feet, Cilia looked on with a skeptical gaze. Stunned that they had managed to defeat Behemoth on their own, she praised Oros for his incredible power, though he humbly insisted he couldn't have achieved victory alone. She insisted she was only following his instructions, and Urus decided to drop the matter rather than press her further. He insisted that a monster of such power would surely harbor a massive spirit stone, but as they examined the remains, they were met with a sight that left them completely stunned. Tucked inside the creature's stomach was a tiny girl with delicate wings, small enough to be cradled in both hands, leaving Cilia to question the nature of her existence. Eris suggested that her unique magical signature might indicate she was a spirit inhabiting the area, but the moment was suddenly interrupted. Regaining consciousness, the girl remarked on how well she had rested. Noticing the two unfamiliar faces, she calmly asked them to identify themselves. Despite her small stature, Eris could instinctively feel her overwhelming power, which far surpassed that of even the largest behemoths. He resolved to remain cautious for the time being, taking care not to do anything that might startle her. Without much hesitation, Cilia introduced herself as a member of the party, and took it upon herself to introduce him as well, despite his obvious concern. The young girl cheerfully introduced herself as the notorious spirit of the forest, and seeing this, Eris felt relieved that his concerns were misplaced. Feeling a bit embarrassed by his own paranoia, he listened as Cilia pointed out how surprisingly shy he was acting. He also remarked on how rare it was to encounter humans so deep within the mountains. When questioned further about their motives, Eris openly revealed that they were searching for spirit stones. Upon hearing those words, he paused for a brief moment. He focused his mind, manifesting a solid chair made of stone. Urus was stunned to find the supreme spirit stone right before him, and when he expressed interest, the protagonist handed it over without a moment's hesitation. He even offered to prepare a double batch for the group, leaving Ares to stare in wonder at the quality of the item. He considered its immense weight, mindful that even a single kilogram of spirit stone was considered an extreme rarity. While this was a dream scenario for him, he admitted that the sheer scale was far beyond what they could afford. Salf, however, nonchalantly mentioned that she could produce as many batches of those stones as she wanted. Cilia then explained the nature of spirits to her. Typically, spirit stones are formed from residual magical energy, meaning even the largest beasts rarely yield anything bigger than the palm of a hand. Since no larger alternative existed anywhere on the market, the item was considered truly priceless. Harris gently explained that he couldn't accept such a priceless item without offering her something in return. She simply stated that her only wish was to travel. Though he asked with some hesitation if that was truly all she wanted, she confirmed it with a nod. Celia also questioned if it was truly acceptable for spirits like her to leave the forest, though she assured everyone she could manage being away for several years. Looking somber, she shared that she had been trapped alone in the shadows of the forest for an incredibly long time. The situation had grown truly stifling for her, yet she admitted that simply speaking with them had significantly lifted her spirits and improved her mood. Aris and Celia shared a brief look before Urus reached out his hand, inviting the protagonist to join them on their journey. When Aris activated his item slot to store the spirit stone, his companion was stunned and asked if they could also travel to the spirit realm. Noticing his confusion, she opted for a demonstration, quickly phasing half of her body into the item slot. Aris finally understood that the domain he had long mistaken for a simple inventory was, in reality, a spirit realm. He noted that the space was incredibly vast and, more importantly, held a much deeper significance. She remarked that for a human, being able to access the spirit realm was a truly remarkable feat. Meanwhile, Celia showered Aris with praise, leaving him puzzled as to why she seemed so personally proud of his success. She further explained that she could now travel freely from the spirit realm, and that Aris had essentially become a spirit himself, prompting Sulf to playfully refer to him as her father. Stunned by the revelation, he fell silent, prompting her to ask if she had said something wrong. However, Aris pointed out that since she emerged from the behemoth, she was technically its offspring. Ignoring his remark entirely, she began addressing Celia as her mother, who simply played along without a care in the world. Sulf questioned if she disliked the title of mom, but Celia innocently explained that she was just genuinely happy to finally have a family. With a tender, blushing look, she shared the news that Urus had finally become a father as well. Upon hearing this, Aris stood there in stunned silence, caught off guard by the sudden impression that he and Celia were already in a relationship. He began to wonder if he was feeling unwell, while Celia questioned if he truly disliked being called Dad that much. Faced with their innocent expressions, he couldn't bring himself to refuse their impulsive and playful ideas. Upon reaching the village, the trio was greeted by a surprisingly large crowd, and while he marveled at the population, Iris noticed that his rare presence was drawing plenty of stares. Feeling flustered by their intense gazes, she grew embarrassed and gave herself a subtle reprimand within her inner realm. Unexpectedly, Eris found himself face to face with his former party members, the same individuals who had heartlessly cast him out. As Aros questioned their motives, Nardo urged him to soften his tone, reminding him of their history as former comrades. Eurus struggled to understand why they had suddenly reappeared after casting him out, but Nardo began explaining how the situation had shifted since his departure. While everyone else seemed preoccupied with their own thoughts, he began to wonder if he truly missed the presence of his former comrades. He added that he might be willing to welcome him back into the hero party, should he wish to return. Nardo added that Eris was still officially listed on the hero party's register, implying his return was expected and that he could still reclaim his position. It had only been 3 days since they lost Ari's vital enchantments, yet Nardo and the others abandoned their pride much sooner than he had anticipated. Accompanied by a subtle slicing gesture, Eris pointed out that they all seemed to be misunderstanding something fundamental. He questioned whether they truly wanted him back in the party, noting that they seemed to have forgotten their place, a blunt observation that left everyone in stunned silence. Nardo retorted sharply, claiming Eris was the one who misunderstood their true motives. The other members added their own warnings, stating that abandoning the hero's path would bring his rise to power to an end, and emphasized that this was his final chance to reconsider. Even when pressured to reconsider his choices, Eris bluntly informed them that he had no interest in status or heroics, swiftly summoning the defeated behemoth from his inventory portal above them to show he was perfectly content with his current life. He made it clear that he had no intention of returning to the hero's party, as he now prioritized the meaningful friendships he had built along his journey. Seething with fury, Naruto addressed Koki and threatened to wipe his name from the royal city's records, warning Urus that he would soon regret his earlier defiance. Iris responded with a nonchalant warning, noting that only time would tell who would end up with more regrets, and told him to do as he pleased. Moments after they departed, Salth emerged from the portal to ask about the strangers, only for Celia to reveal that they were members of Aura's former hero party. Celia questioned why they couldn't have simply asked politely if they were so desperate to have him back, but Eri noted that their pride would never allow for such a thing. She also informed them that she would retreat into the spirit realm whenever she sensed anyone else's presence. Shortly after, they reached Gale's workshop and presented the spirit stone chair, leaving him completely stunned by the sight. Gale quickly donned his glasses for a closer look, questioning how Eris had come across such a rare material, though Eris simply claimed it was a gift from the spirits. It was an observation that, in all honesty, held a fair amount of truth. Gale remarked that he had never encountered a material of such exceptional quality before. After expressing his eagerness to begin the unique project, Gale set to work, meticulously shaping the piece with precise hammer strikes. Aureus questioned whether his actions would disrupt the Spirit Stone's magic formation, just as Sherrod arrived to suggest a tea break, while Gale remained deep in his work. As they shared tea, Sherrod boasted that her grandfather could do the work of 100 men in record time, prompting Celia to note how much of a braggart Gale truly was. He questioned whether such a complex item could truly be crafted so rapidly, prompting Aureus to explain that modern blacksmiths also utilize magic in their trade. The immense magical energy he felt radiating from Gale earlier served as clear evidence that the rumors of his exceptional skills were true. When Air asked when he should return for the swords, Sherax's claim that they would be finished by the end of the day caused him to leap to his feet in disbelief. He remarked that everything was moving far too fast, but she continued to praise her grandfather's legendary efficiency just as Gale arrived to announce the work was finished. He presented the two extraordinary swords before them, confidently declaring that they were his ultimate masterpieces. The moment Eris took hold of the blade, its incredible lightness and speed became apparent. Despite the absence of spirit stones, the weapon was infused with dense magic intended to maximize its destructive potential. Celia was equally thrilled to receive her first custom-made sword, which felt remarkably light and easy to handle, though Herast quickly warned her not to swing it around carelessly. His struggle proved pointless when a casual swing of her blade triggered a massive magical blast, leveling Gale's house and leaving everyone in a state of shock. A massive hole had been torn through the workshop ceiling, leaving Celia trembling as she weighed her next move. Gale soon realized that entrusting his prized weapon to such an inexperienced amateur had been a serious mistake. Eurus reacted instantly, channeling his healing magic to effortlessly repair the large gap in the ceiling. Impressed by the display, Cher praised his remarkable mastery as Gale finally allowed himself to relax. Meanwhile, Silly bowed deeply before Gale and earnestly apologized for ruining his home, but he kindly reassured her, noting that the house actually looked much cleaner than it had before. Furthermore, Gale secured a promise that Eris would take responsibility for Celia and master his new sword, as he was convinced the two shared a natural connection. After giving their firm consent, the two of them promptly went on their way. Upon exiting the workshop, Celia apologized once more for her impulsiveness, leading Ares to remind her to handle her new weapon with extreme caution due to its immense power. Suddenly, she appeared out of nowhere, arching her back as she let out a wide yawn. When he asked if she was still tired, she was quick to deny it, making Ares realize just how childlike she could be. Celia suddenly shivered, remarking that although the days were growing longer, the nights still held a lingering chill. Suddenly struck by an idea, she offered a casual smile and gently took Aura's hand, explaining that it would help keep them warm for the time being. His face flushed uncontrollably as she teased him, playfully noting that they certainly looked like a couple. Celia remained unbothered, nonchalantly explaining that his hands were simply very warm. As she laced her fingers through his, she softly admitted her desire for the moment to last forever. Eris's face flushed beet red as he worried she might be completely oblivious to the awkwardness she was causing, though he also wondered if he was simply overthinking the situation. She then playfully remarked on just how well her parents seemed to be getting along. When she asked if they were finally returning home, Eris clarified that they were actually bound for the Silius Inn. With a mischievous blush, self-mockingly asked if they would be sharing a room, but Celia casually pointed out that there was no space available for Orose. Self-complimented her and playfully called her mom, prompting Eris to realize he needed to exercise extreme caution around him. Moments later, a suspicious boy in a tattered hood arrived at the pre-arranged meeting spot, clearly searching for a guest clad in a black cloak. While Eris continued his journey, the boy suddenly stepped forward to intercept him. Eris then questioned him about his true identity. The boy offered a silent gesture, beckoning him into a nearby alley. Celia questioned whether he actually knew that person, while Eris observed that the boy didn't seem aggressive, yet appeared curious about the current situation. A sudden realization struck him, making him wonder if the suspicious boy had already uncovered his secret identity as a former hero. Without a second thought, Iris followed the boy into the narrow alleyway. The boy then offered a quick apology for intruding on their space. When questioned about his identity, he revealed that he made a living by purchasing guild cards. He was convinced that he possessed additional guild cards and had been waiting for them to arrive. But upon hearing this information, Eris pointed out that it was impossible for a personal guild card to be a surplus item, especially since trading them was strictly forbidden. Realizing he had mistaken Ares for someone else, the boy immediately tried to scramble away. He proposed that they should both simply act as if they were complete strangers. Oris firmly seized him by the hood, his expression turning stern as he began to speak. The boy appeared fully aware of his actions, accepting that he would have to face the consequences for the sake of the world. After being swiftly cast into the spirit realm, the boy insisted his actions were strictly for profit and promised never to repeat them. A short time later, Eris and Celia reached the guild house and immediately presented a stack of guild cards to the receptionist. When she inquired about what had transpired, she was left in a state of complete shock. He provided a comprehensive account of everything that had transpired. She explained that the theft and loss of guild cards had been a persistent and troublesome issue for a long time, but she was cut off before she could elaborate further. The shrill cry of an unknown woman pierced the air as she demanded to know if they also held her guild card. A crowd quickly gathered, with people insistently demanding their guild cards. In a state of panic, the receptionist pleaded with them to settle down and retrieve their cards individually. Observing the chaotic scene, Harris realized the situation was serious and apologized for keeping her so busy right as she was preparing to close. He then asked about the fate of the boy involved in the crime, and she explained that he would be turned over to the guards before his parents were notified. In that moment, the boy cried out that he had no family to return to, coming to the realization that he was an orphan with no one left to call his name. Eris explained that he understood those feelings all too well, having endured the pain of losing his own parents at a young age. Still, he acknowledged that none of this could truly justify his past wrongdoings. He realized that he would finally have to answer for the consequences of his choices. Harris inquired about the fate of the orphans, and the receptionist clarified that they would likely be transferred to an educational facility in the royal capital. Hearing this, Eris felt a wave of relief, firmly believing that young orphans like them still deserved a genuine chance at rehabilitation. Just as they prepared to depart, the boy offered his thanks with a heavy, somber expression. Living that way, he barely earned enough to survive, while Eris quietly took note of his disheveled appearance. He realized the man was nothing more than a small-time thug, with the bulk of his profits being funneled directly to his boss. He urged the boy to leave the underworld behind, emphasizing that Urus had gone to great lengths to save him from an even darker fate. As they finally prepared to leave, Horace spotted the same woman who had been so vocal about her guild card earlier, now standing there with a visibly dejected expression. Judging by her reaction, it was clear that her missing guild card wasn't among the recovered items. Celia's eyes narrowed as she caught him staring at another woman, and with a visible look of annoyance, she bluntly declared she was taking her leave. Noticing her strange behavior, he asked if something was the matter, but she insisted that she wasn't upset. Despite her lingering pout, the two soon found themselves standing before the quest board. Celia pondered which mission would best put her new sword to the test, despite still being restricted to E-rank quests. Meanwhile, Hieros reflected on the hefty price of his sword and decided to take on a quest to cover his lodging expenses. Celia expressed her doubts, suggesting they stick to standard requests, but he rejected the idea and immediately handed her a quest form. The objective for this mission was to hunt down an E-rank golem. While the Golans boasted incredible strength and rock-like durability, they were hindered by their exceptionally slow movement. Orisa also mentioned that a group of 12 E-rank adventurers could defeat this enemy, making it a suitable target for her to challenge as well. Grief and concern clouded her expression as she questioned if they could truly overcome an enemy force meant for a dozen fighters. He calmly reassured her that she was no longer alone, promising that under his protection, she wouldn't suffer so much as a scratch. Furthermore, he expressed his admiration for her self-reliance. Feeling a renewed sense of confidence, she accepted the request, while Aorus noted that praising her companions never failed to lift her spirits. Arriving at the lush forest, Soltz's face beamed with wonder as she took in the vibrant scenery. He found the vast, vibrant landscape to be incredibly refreshing. Reflecting on the long years she spent trapped in that dark, isolated forest, he vowed to ensure she could finally experience the outside world to its absolute fullest. Refocusing Celia on their objective, he quickly formulated a strategy. He would use his magic to bait the Gaul, creating an opening for her to strike from behind. As they carefully put their plan into motion, he stepped forward to act as a decoy for the massive and fearsome golem. At Eris's signal, Celia lunged at the golem and struck it with devastating force, splitting the creature in two and leaving her questioning in disbelief if it was truly defeated. He confirmed his suspicions, realizing that while Gale's sword was undeniably formidable, the weapon alone couldn't account for such an overwhelming display of power. Celia suspected the dragons in the area were weaker than they had initially expected, but Eris disagreed as he quickly withdrew his blade. He noted that they weren't much different from ordinary goblins, but as he moved to strike the next one, he soon realized that their latest weapons were far more powerful than he had anticipated. His progress was clearly outpacing his own comprehension, yet he still chose to confront every challenge at once. He pointed out that facing them one by one would simply be an ineffective strategy. Silea questioned whether the Gons could truly coordinate a simultaneous attack, prompting Eris to forego an explanation and simply demonstrate his power. Quickly manifesting a magic circle, he cast his energy across the terrain to pinpoint the exact locations of all surrounding enemies. He then successfully targeted the 8 remaining Gons, using enchantment magic to grant them a menacing aura. As the monstrous creatures closed in, Iris calmly remarked that she was now strong enough to manage them, leaving Celia stunned by the total success of Iris's plan. In a flash of fluid movements, she effortlessly took down the entire group, leaving Iris completely stunned by her skill. He praised her rapid progress, noting that she had mastered the technique from their recent hunt in just 2 days, even though she was wielding that specific sword for the very first time. He explained that these were only the fundamentals, leaving Celia stunned by how much more she still had to learn. While storing the remains of the defeated foes in his inventory, he noted that she was absorbing the power much more effectively than he had expected. As they prepared to depart, he called her back, noting that she had gathered an impressive amount of scrap. However, his expression shifted as he began to inspect her findings more closely. He came across a guild card belonging to a sage named Yukina Rembrandt, identifying her as the same woman who had been frantically searching for her missing ID. Eris took the time to explain the nature of sages to Celia. They explained that this was one of the rare, specialized classes that stood on equal footing with the sword saints. Celia nonchalantly asked if he also wielded a sword like her, but he denied it. He was a master of offensive magic, demonstrating a level of talent that was truly exceptional. Looking excited, she asked about the possibility of 2 unique classes joining forces. He explained that their respective roles required rare talents that were essential to the nation's stability. He suggested they head back to the guild immediately to deliver the news, taking a moment to pat Saltz on the head and praise her for her vital assistance. Meanwhile, Yukina continued her frantic search at the guild house, deeply concerned she might never find her missing card. When she asked about the replacement fee, the receptionist informed her that it would cost a steep 10,000 jewels. Just as the pressure began to weigh on her, Ares' team arrived to deliver some reassuring news. They also informed her that they had recovered her guild card during their journey. Yukina was overcome with joy the moment she finally spotted her missing guild card. She followed up by asking if her wallet had been found as well, but Aura clarified that the guild card was the only item they had recovered. She explained that her wallet had been stolen, noting that the thief had simply discarded her cards. Deeply relieved to have it back, she insisted on finding a way to repay him for his help, though Harris quickly assured her that it wasn't necessary. She countered that such an outcome was impossible, arguing that the delivery could have easily gone astray, or worse, been dangerously exploited. He confirmed that black market dealers were indeed trafficking guild cards, admitting that the risks were far more severe than he had originally anticipated. She then confidently admitted that she was currently carrying no cash. She expressed a complete willingness to repay him with her own body. The remark left Aris completely bewildered, and when Silly innocently asked for clarification, Aris could only stutter, unable to find the words to explain herself. Realizing it was still too early for Celia to grasp such a delicate situation, he shifted his attention toward Yukina. He cautioned her to be more mindful of her surroundings before speaking so carelessly. She sincerely promised to step up on his behalf whenever the opportunity arose, further emphasizing her commitment. With genuine sincerity, she expressed her desire to repay the kindness he had shown her. He found himself tongue-tied and unable to speak clearly in her presence, leading her to believe she was being viewed as a burden who wouldn't be able to contribute to the fight. Though Aureus was visibly surprised, she stood by her words, determined to give her all to fulfill any request they had. Eris stood speechless as the innocent intent behind her reckless words finally dawned on him. Flooded with relief, he nervously accepted her offer of help, leaving Yukina to wonder why he had suddenly become so flustered. Suddenly, Yukina recalled what had happened earlier. Mortified by her impulsive comment, she looked away in embarrassment, unable to believe she had spoken so carelessly to a complete stranger. She admitted her mistake, acknowledging that she should have been more careful with her words, while Eris gently encouraged her not to dwell on it. Meanwhile, Silly remained blissfully unaware of the awkward atmosphere, enthusiastically inviting Yukina to join their party for future adventures. Without a moment's delay, the 3 of them introduced themselves to each other. Eris expressed his anticipation to see Yukina's abilities firsthand, while she was just as eager to put his own skills to the test. Eris announced his claim over the testing grounds, and the receptionist immediately offered to lead the group to the training area. Upon arriving at the testing grounds, Yukina eagerly prepared to demonstrate her magic, while Aoris noted just how confident she appeared. With practiced skill, she channeled her mana and swiftly unleashed her offensive spell, Flame Beans. He unleashed a lightning-fast beam that completely incinerated the straw dummy, Celia was impressed by her own show of strength, and Urus praised her flawless performance as he thoroughly scanned the testing grounds. Yukina questioned if the exam site had always looked so battered, entirely oblivious to the fact that the person responsible for the destruction was standing right beside her. The receptionist then provided a full account of the events that had transpired on the day of Aorus's exam. Furthermore, she handed Aura 300,000 jewels as payment for completing the quest and bringing back a total of 10 golems. The funds were divided among the Arist and Celia, granting each member 150,000, a staggering sum that left Yukina in complete disbelief. Celia remained modest, clarifying that none of those achievements were actually her own. Furthermore, Eris earned 70 guild points and officially advanced to the status of a D-rank adventurer. Yukina was left speechless by the news that he had jumped from E to D rank in just 2 quests, only for the moment to be interrupted by her stomach growling loudly. He suggested they head to the cafeteria for lunch before continuing, but to his surprise, she dejectedly admitted that she was completely broke. He was taken aback by the sudden realization that he hadn't eaten anything since the day before. With a look of resolve, Celia took her hand and insisted that she couldn't head into battle without a proper meal first. She remained firm, insisting that lunch would be her treat. Upon reaching the lively cafeteria, Yukina began clearing every plate in front of her with a ravenous hunger, while Urus watched in disbelief at her massive appetite. Yukina beamed as she praised the delicious meal, expressing her sincere gratitude to the two of them. Celia responded by complimenting her on her remarkable appetite. Aris was left wondering how she had the audacity to say something like that directly to her face. Celia and Yukina appeared to be developing a natural rapport with one another. Iris observed that Yukina seemed like an ordinary girl despite her unique profession, prompting him to ask if she had been constantly scouted by other parties. Acknowledging her prestigious reputation as a sage, he asked which party she was currently traveling with, but she admitted she was now adventuring solo after failing to fit in with her previous group. She explained that their visions for the future no longer aligned, a sentiment he recognized as a common reason for couples to drift apart. Silly then questioned whether Yukina had a more significant reason for being so meticulous about her future. In response, she revealed her mission to locate the 7 magical tombs scattered across the world. Eris inquired whether the rumors were true regarding a legendary tome that granted the ability to cast various spells simply by reading it. She explained that only the truly worthy were capable, while Eris noted that such a treasure could only be mastered by the wise. She went on to reveal that Key was a distinguished magic scholar, presenting a collection of meticulous research notes that contained vital clues about his spellbooks. When Eris asked for clarification, she revealed she was referring to her father, who had passed away when she was still a young girl. She swore to gather everything within her lifetime, leading Celia to ask why she was going to such extremes. The reason was the recent passing of her mother, the woman who had devotedly cared for her all these years. As Yukina processed a complex mix of grief and newfound freedom, she happened upon her father's long-lost research. Aris finally understood the motivation behind the collection of spellbooks, realizing the immense emotional weight she had been carrying. Yukina also shared her sincere ambition to master resurrection magic once she had successfully gathered all 7 volumes. Confused and struggling to make sense of the situation, he asked if her goal was to resurrect her parents, a motive she admitted was partially behind her actions. Her deepest fear remained the possibility of losing someone close to her once again. Though others praised her for being kind-hearted, she humbly considered herself to be more of a coward. Eris was no stranger to the crushing pain of losing someone dear to her. He felt certain that he would have made the same choice had he been in her position. Surprisingly, Yukina wasn't defined solely by the tragedy of her parents' death. Her dedication to mastering resurrection magic clearly reflected the depth of her compassion. Her unwavering courage proved that she truly lived up to the esteemed title of a sage. The more Eris reflected on her steadfast determination, the more he realized he wanted her by his side. He was certain that if she could unlock her hidden potential, she would become an indispensable ally in his ultimate quest to defeat the Demon King. With much on his mind, he finally asked her if she would officially join their party. He invited her to join his party, suggesting that by teaming up, they could defeat the Demon King while also fulfilling her dream of traveling the world to collect ancient artifacts. Gathering magic tones from across the world aligned perfectly with Ukena's goals, making the task a worthwhile endeavor. While she appreciated the gesture, she politely turned him down, prompting him to ask for her reasoning. She explained that she wasn't suited for hero parties, as she much preferred working alone rather than in a group. Eris politely concurred, noting that forming a party wasn't always a simple or pleasant experience. She emphasized that every battle against powerful monsters carried the risk of a permanent farewell, a sobering reality to consider as they discussed the threat of the Demon Lord. This realization only strengthened her resolve, as every group that had challenged the Demon Lords over the last millennium had ultimately met with failure. Prompted by those words, Aura searched for her true motivation and realized she was indeed afraid of losing her allies, a fact she admitted without hesitation. She noted that while she didn't expect Oris's party to be defeated easily, a deep sense of anxiety continued to weigh on her mind. He conceded that a newcomer would likely stand no chance in a direct confrontation with the Demon King. With a look of firm determination, he declared he would prove their actions weren't just a reckless gamble. Celia stepped in, promising to do her absolute best to impress Yukina and convince her to join their group. Furthermore, Arist invited Yukina to accompany them on their quest, believing that witnessing their progress firsthand would help her provide a more decisive answer. With him finally joining the team, they were at last prepared to take on a D-rank quest. Ascending from E rank to D rank marked a massive shift in both prestige and difficulty, as a single D rank member was considered equal to 10 E rankers. Silly remained skeptical, doubting they were truly prepared for an upper-tier D rank quest that required them to eliminate 30 salamanders. The plains are inhabited by ferocious lizard-like monsters, boasting powerful legs and strong jaws that make them a threat even a group of average adventurers couldn't handle. Aris confidently insisted that they shouldn't waste time on weak enemies if they wanted to truly demonstrate their group's full potential. Just then, Soltz's voice echoed in Aros's mind, asking for permission to exit the realm as she began to reveal herself. Yukina was struck by the child's grace as they greeted her, noting how refreshing the outdoor air felt. Celia remarked that she could still keep a close eye on her surroundings, even while remaining hidden within the spirit realm. Intrigued by the newcomer, the child playfully circled Yukina while she asked about the youngster's identity. After revealing her name and identity as a spirit, Eris asked Yukina to be gentle with her, explaining that she had recently endured a difficult ordeal. Initially, Aris had been hesitant to reveal his true self to Yukina. He realized that keeping her hidden indefinitely was no longer an option if he truly intended to recruit Yukina into his party. The story shifts to the Bergen Forest near the plains, where Aris nonchalantly told Celia to handle the enemy first, leaving her stunned by the sudden instruction. She hurried over and embraced him tightly in a desperate attempt to protest his choice, an act that caused Aris to blush slightly. He knew she was more than capable of handling the task, but her lingering nerves made him worry she might not perform at her best. Meanwhile, Yukina watched their interaction and quietly wondered if the two of them were actually a couple. With a lingering blush, Aris reassured Celia that as party members, he would always come to her aid whenever she was in danger. Celius's demeanor brightened at his comforting words, and she wasted no time in agreeing to his command. Moments later, Celia stood her ground against the menacing creature, readying herself for an attack. The moment the monster sensed her presence, Celia charged forward without hesitation. The beast's agility surpassed that of standard E-rank foes, leaving Celia at a clear disadvantage in a direct contest of speed. However, her title as the Sword Saint granted her both extraordinary reflexes and razor-sharp instincts. In close-quarters combat, the ability to anticipate an opponent's next move was the essential key to victory. Celia's sharp reflexes allowed her to narrowly evade the monster's strike as it charged toward her with blinding speed. She took down the enemies with swift, calculated strikes just as Celia finally managed to blast the monster salamander away. Aura praised her remarkable skills, while the sheer intensity of her power left everyone watching completely stunned. Turning to Yukina, he asked if she was still shaken. While she could only wonder about the grueling training Celia must have endured to reach such a level of skill, Yukina was stunned to learn that Celia had only started her specialized training a few days ago, meaning she still had immense potential for growth. Next, it was Eris's turn to step forward and demonstrate his own refined abilities. He explained that their group functioned in perfect harmony, always prioritizing a careful strategy before any confrontation. While Celia cut down foes with her blade, he used his magic to swiftly eliminate the monsters. By his estimation, the group's combined strength put them on par with C-rank adventurers. This level of strength allowed them to confidently take on C-rank or even higher-tier challenges. However, while he boasted about his formidable group, Yukina tried to interject with something important, only to be completely ignored. Driven by a singular resolve to prove that no one in their party would fall, he directly addressed her fear of losing allies as he initiated his first calculated move. In one motion, he bolstered his own strength with a powerful enhancement while simultaneously unleashing a debilitating spell upon the enemy ranks. His plan was to unleash Hellfire, a destructive adaptation of prominence that causes fireballs to collide and detonate with overwhelming force. This fusion spell typically demands a level of magical energy that even a group of high-ranking mages would struggle to produce together. By utilizing his unique and specialized magic, he could efficiently restructure the spell's composition to unleash its full power entirely on his own. Aris was so absorbed in demonstrating his vast power to Yukina that he failed to register a single word she tried to say. Though he admitted they wouldn't emerge completely unscathed, he strategically raised a barrier to protect them as he cautiously put his plan into motion. A massive explosion swept through the entire area, instantly wiping out every monster in sight. As the dust from the explosion began to settle, Eris turned back to check on Yukina. He soon realized she had lost consciousness and collapsed onto the floor. After Yukina regained consciousness, Eri asked her for confirmation on whether she had truly witnessed his abilities in action. He admitted that he might have overdone it, simply to ensure she recognized the true scale of his power. While she acknowledged Silius's power, she noted that Eris was in a league of his own. Conversely, she felt like an outsider who would only hold the group back. But Cilia intervened without a moment's hesitation. She confessed that she had also felt like a burden when she first met Eros. But Yukina reassured her that Celia's previous party experience and disciplined training were actually significant assets. She was caught off guard when Eris disclosed that Celia had been a solo adventurer before they met. He insisted on his ability to recognize true potential and asked Yukina to trust his instincts, seemingly winning her over in the process. He proposed that she attempt to defeat a salamander on her own, and Yukina went along with the suggestion without any protest. She proceeded to manifest a radiant sphere of magic within her palm. She fired a devastating beam of energy directly at the creature. Realizing a single shot wasn't enough, she quickly launched a follow-up attack to finish the creature off. He looked on, witnessing her impressive display of magical power. He acknowledged her impressive output and natural talent, though he noted that she still had plenty of room to refine her skills. He explained that under normal circumstances, mastering magic requires years of grueling training and dedication. While hard-earned intuition and experience were undeniably important, there was also a clever trick to the process. Mirroring her exact magic and techniques, he unleashed a far more powerful blast that easily wiped out several salamanders at once. After collecting the formidable claws of the fallen monsters as proof of their hunt, he explained that he had kept his magic output at the same level as hers, simply enhancing it with more refined techniques. Meanwhile, Yukina's jaw dropped in disbelief as she encountered a magical forest 3 times the size of her own. He meticulously deconstructed the technique for her, using fire beams to illustrate how advanced magic is essentially a fusion of basic spells, though he noted that a significant amount of mana is typically lost during the combination process. By reinforcing that connection, they would be able to eliminate the waste far more efficiently. She quickly understood his explanation and noted that nearly 70% of the power was lost during the conversion, though Aureus was confident she could still sustain that magic. This enhancement allowed her to nearly triple her current power level. However, she remained skeptical, viewing these as mere theories and doubting whether they would actually hold up in practice. He gave her a direct answer, explaining that she could use connection magic to seamlessly merge her spells, prompting her to ask if this extra activation would increase her mana consumption. Rejecting the idea, he flicked his finger to produce a small spark, explaining that the magic didn't manifest elements within a person, but rather used a tiny amount of mana for the initial ignition. However, she soon began questioning the exact details behind the connection magic's specific combination. She was stunned when he casually dismissed the technique as nothing more than basic magic. He also explained that his former party members treated stacking buffs from multiple sources as a routine requirement. He chimed in to remind the bewildered women that the standard logic of magic was being completely turned upside down. Grabbing a stick, he sketched a human figure in the dirt to illustrate the internal magic circuits, explaining that they function like a binary system, where 1 represents an active state and 0 signifies inactivity. He further explained that all forms of magic could be precisely crafted, using simple combinations of 0s and 1s. As the number of branches grew, they gained the ability to precisely toggle individual segments on and off. The intricate concept finally clicked for her, and she noted that increasing the branches would theoretically result in a total of 48,816 magical combinations. Her expression shifted as she grasped the staggering scale of the system. 10 branches yielded over 1,000 combinations, while 20 resulted in more than 1,000,000. It appeared as though the entirety of magic could be explained through these intricate patterns. With a look of resolve, she quickly began leafing through the pages of her book. Applying her newfound understanding of binary logic, she began testing various spells using combinations of 1s and 0s. Her face beamed with excitement as she realized the sheer number of techniques she could now master, her enthusiasm serving as a clear reminder to Eris that she was indeed the brilliant daughter of a scholar. She then asked for confirmation, wondering if the search for resurrection spellbooks was finally over. Harris politely declined, explaining that his findings only scratched the surface of how magic truly functioned. Despite his knowledge, certain aspects of ancient magic remained a mystery to him, leading him to demonstrate the true capabilities of connection magic. He carefully etched a sequence of 0s and 1s into the ground, advising her to test that specific order first. Following the instructions, Yukina cast 2 basic spells and flawlessly combined them with connection magic, perfectly replicating the technique she had been taught. She then launched a rapid succession of massive, intense fireballs. This triggered a massive explosion, reaching a scale she had never been able to achieve before. Her face beamed with excitement as she finally gained control over her true power, having just finished clearing the entire area of formidable monsters. On their way back, Aris expressed his sincere gratitude for Yukina's help, but she humbly insisted that she was actually the one in his debt, noting that the task would have taken her twice as long to complete alone. She then tentatively asked if she could officially join their party, causing their faces to immediately light up with joy. Overcome with joy, Silly pulled her into a warm, tight embrace. She playfully remarked that she had officially gained a new mother. Eris gave her a warm welcome to the party, while Yukina vowed to do everything in her power to be a valuable asset to the team. Back at the guild house, the receptionist was genuinely surprised to see the once reluctant Yukina finally join a party, while Cilia excitedly remarked on his natural talent for drawing people toward him. The receptionist examined the claws they brought back as proof of the hunt, but despite the evidence being sufficient, she found the result rather underwhelming. Yukina explained that the magic she had been taught was so intensely powerful that it had inadvertently melted away her surroundings. Only the remnants of those monstrous salamanders were left behind. Impressed by his methods, the receptionist complimented Eris on his teaching, but he modestly shifted the credit to Cilia and Yukina's innate talent. This enabled them to master new skills at an accelerated pace, driven by his belief that a narrow perspective would only hinder their true potential. He explained that focusing solely on what was right in front of them would prevent them from seeing the distant moon, but by looking past those self-imposed limits, they could see everything with perfect clarity, an analogy that Yukina found deeply impressive. She then inquired if they had chosen a party name, though he admitted they still hadn't settled on a suitable title. After careful consideration, Eris promptly registered their party under the name Infinity. Once they finished their long-awaited meal, Eris asked about their sleeping arrangements, only for Yukina to admit she lacked the funds to renew her own room earlier that day. Without hesitation, Cilia suggested they share a room for the time being, prompting a surprised Yukina to ask if they were truly staying together. Noticing her questioning gaze, he nervously explained that he had only complied because Celius had been so insistent. Despite your insistence, I eventually agreed to stay. He contemplated their situation and decided it was definitely time for them to move into a larger mansion. Suddenly, several suspicious hooded figures closed in on them, claiming that Yukina had dropped her guild card. Upon closer inspection, she realized the item definitely didn't belong to her. Catching everyone off guard, the figures suddenly seized Cilia and held her hostage, pressing a blade firmly against her throat. One of the threatening men then commanded Eris to raise his hands and approach them in silence. When Eris questioned their sudden arrival, Yukina suggested that these thugs were likely black market guild card dealers, a suspicion the man confirmed while noting her sharp intuition. She nonchalantly noted that his behavior was a dead giveaway, reasoning that only someone using another person's guild card would act so suspiciously. Recalling the young boy from earlier, Eris wondered if these men had come to avenge their fallen comrade. But the thug mockingly suggested she was wide of the mark. He admitted that the boy was nothing more than a disposable tool, intended to be used and then cast aside. He remained completely indifferent to whatever had become of him. He lashed out, warning that they were in serious danger, but Eris remained completely unfazed, noting that they should have expected such risks when operating an illicit business in the capital. This only enraged the thug further, prompting him to suggest selling Russ's 2 companions to cover their losses. They warned that Urez would surely regret making them his enemies, yet he composedly countered that they were the ones who had made a grave error. In that exact moment, Othcilia reclaimed her sword while Yukina gathered her magical power. They easily subdued the thugs, leaving their leader stunned by the women's impressive speed, which allowed Eris to sneak up and capture him from behind. He noted that Cilia and Yukina were far too powerful for his subordinates to handle, and after binding the 3 of them in rope, he instructed Cilia to call for the royal guards. In an attempt to sway him, the leader quickly offered Eris a higher payment than what the guild was providing if he agreed to join them. Hears then revealed that he hadn't received any compensation from the guild for his efforts. In truth, Eris preferred a peaceful society, one completely devoid of any illegal black market dealings. He further asserted that his actions were guided by his own principles and interests, rather than just a desire for money. After arriving at the inn, Celia questioned why Eris hadn't intervened when the thug took her hostage, to which he replied that he simply trusted her to handle the situation on her own. Despite her unreadable expression, she skillfully steered the conversation in a different direction. The RIS issued an announcement, stating that they needed to hold a discussion regarding the distribution of rewards. Yukina countered that defining contribution was a complex matter, as rewards were typically allocated based on each person's individual efforts. Harris reflected on his principles, reasoning that while damage dealers typically receive the most recognition, support roles should be just as fairly rewarded. To guarantee a fair distribution, he declared that 10% would be set aside for party expenses, while the rest would be shared equally among the group. Yukina immediately voiced her protest, arguing that the decision was unfair given that he had undeniably played the most crucial role in the fight. Even with this new arrangement, it was still far more than he had ever received during his time with the Hero Party. Eris pointed out that as long as they both continued to grow stronger at the same pace, their situation would eventually stabilize. Empowered by his words, the two women felt a renewed sense of purpose and committed to working diligently as a team. Aris suggested that the group should pool their resources for lodging and find a larger inn to accommodate everyone. Yukina pointed toward the cot and questioned if Aris and Celia shared the same bed, which Celia confirmed without a second thought. She further revealed that he would often hold her so firmly in his sleep that she struggled to break free, leaving her still stunned that he had acted that way while she was resting. As she settled onto the plush cot, Yukina reflected on how long it had been since she'd experienced such a lively night and an active day. Eris gave her an affectionate pat on the head, but he immediately felt a sharp glare directed his way. Locking eyes with Celia, he found himself struggling to justify his actions. Feeling a pang of jealousy toward Yukina, she collapsed onto the cot and suddenly demanded that he pet her as well, leaving him standing there in complete shock. Left with no other choice, he settled in between them, quickly becoming flustered by the sudden physical closeness. The following morning, Yukina greeted him but quickly noted from his weary expression that he hadn't gotten much rest. Aris was the only one who truly understood the real reason he couldn't find any peace. Upon arriving at the cafeteria, they found a massive crowd gathered around a notice explaining that the facility was closed due to a severe shortage of ingredients. Nonetheless, Aris proceeded to step inside. A foul stench immediately filled the air, and as they investigated, they discovered that the entire stock of ingredients had rotted, with the chef confirming that everything had somehow spoiled overnight. Upon examining the spoiled food, Yukina quickly realized that a disruption in magic was responsible for the decay. The Earth's natural mana can occasionally turn volatile, making it likely that it had simply shifted into decay magic by chance. Taking a closer look at the pantry, Eris was stunned to find that the entire stock had somehow rotted away in a single night. To the shock of the onlookers, Orest attempted to bite into a rotting apple, leaving Celia confused until Yukina's keen eyes prompted her to take a second look. She watched in amazement as the decaying apple suddenly restored itself to a perfectly fresh state. Eris realized he could use his repair and enchantment abilities to revert the food to its fresh state, and with a swift motion he restored the entire decayed area. The chef's expressions instantly brightened into looks of pure delight. After expressing his sincere gratitude, the man asked how he could repay them, to which Eris simply requested a delicious meal as their reward. However, having exhausted so much of his vital energy, Eris suddenly stumbled, prompting Celia and Yukina to rush forward and support him. Yukina pointed out that his magic reserves were clearly exhausted after such a massive enchantment, advising him to get some proper nourishment and rest to aid his recovery. The chef immediately ordered his colleagues to help him prepare restorative dishes without delay. As they settled in at the dining table, Yukina expressed her surprise that Eris could actually run out of magic, though he modestly reminded her that he was just as human as they were. He urged the chef to keep the miraculous restoration of the ingredients a secret, but the chef argued that this was his best chance to achieve widespread fame. Meanwhile, Celia proudly remarked that his humble nature was exactly what made him so impressive. Aureus clarified that if the magical disturbance had truly spread across the entire region, the damage was likely severe, making it impossible for him to restore everything on his own. The chef agreed to keep the matter quiet, and as the group finally left the cafeteria, Yukina admitted she was still stunned by how every ingredient had spoiled at the same time. He went on to admit that the magical disturbance was deeply unsettling. This chaotic surge of magic across the planet was seen as a warning of an impending catastrophe, one that would likely lead to grave consequences. Upon arriving at the guild house, they were surprised to find the entire membership gathered to meet them. The receptionist enthusiastically announced that Urus had effortlessly restored the spoiled ingredients, further revealing that clear traces of enchantment magic had been detected. He watched in stunned disbelief as the group unexpectedly discovered the secret of his specialized enchantment magic. One of the members mentioned hearing rumors that a new enchanter would soon be joining the hero's party. Capitalizing on the sudden distraction, Eris quickly identified the man as the real enchanter, managing to shift the focus away from herself for the time being. Turning quickly to his party, he suggested they begin searching for their next request without delay. Furthermore, he felt a sense of relief knowing his position in the hero party had been filled, finally granting him freedom from the constant pursuit of his former teammates. Upon entering, they were struck by how few requests remained on the wall, prompting them to wonder if the recent magical disturbance was the cause. As Eris reached for a form, a loud sound suddenly echoed, catching everyone's attention. An ominous thud echoed from outside, catching them completely off guard. Eris immediately moved to investigate the disturbance, though the dense crowd completely blocked his view. They decided to head upstairs to get a better view, but the sight that met him there was one of absolute horror. He came across a newly established gorilla dungeon, which was currently restricted by an ominous countdown timer. If the magical barrier collapses in just 3 hours, the entire village will be overrun by a flood of monsters. Looking on with a somber expression, Eris noted that this was the exact same type of dungeon that had surfaced in his hometown 6 years prior. While the hero and reinforcements from the capital eventually brought the situation under control, the victory came only after the entire village had been wiped out. Determined to value every life, Eris prioritized a full evacuation and quickly formulated a plan to move everyone to the neighboring village within a strict 3-hour window. Just as Celia and Yukina began to leave, he activated his detection magic to survey the entire area. This ability also granted a significant boost to everyone's movement speed. Following this, a wave of lightness washed over the group, granting them the burst of energy needed to accelerate their pace. A stunned Yukina asked if he had truly granted such a powerful spell to everyone, but Eris simply replied that the magical strain was no issue for him. 6 years ago, he resolved that if such a tragedy were to strike again, he would prevent it regardless of the cost. Moments later, the receptionist appeared to warn them of a newly surfaced dungeon, requesting a hunting party to intervene. Naturally, it was clear that Ares and his team would be the ones to step up. He clarified that they didn't want to be a simple hunting party, but rather an advance team. Taken aback by the bold request, she questioned if he truly intended to operate alone, advising him to remain cautious despite his significant strength. He explained that since these monsters were solitary, they would be dealing with them individually, concluding that a small elite team would be far more efficient than a large standard hunting party. He further noted that he wasn't actually alone, confident that his companions Celia and Yukina would be there to back him up. While the receptionist offered a final warning for their safety, Aorus directed his party to quickly stock up on the required potions. He ventured deeper into the crowd to offer his assistance, only to be met with a startling discovery. When his former party members made a surprise appearance, Nardo informed them that the civilians would follow their lead, but Yukina quickly intervened, stating that no such rule existed, and they had yet to receive official orders from the capital. Exuding a sense of self-importance, Naruto asserted that they were the ones in control. Irritated by his bold claim, she called him unbelievable for his arrogance and pointed out that they were the ones who actually held the advantage. Naruto fired back, questioning if they were trying to hog all the recognition for themselves. He declared that if the situation were true, he would head straight to the dungeon without a moment's delay. The others wisely advised Naruto against rushing, reminding him that they hadn't even finished gathering the necessary supplies. Taking charge, Naruto firmly ordered his companions to advance into the dungeon. As they set off, Yukina remarked on how humiliating it would be for the hero party to lose their lead in the dungeon, while Eris felt a wave of sympathy for the new blessing mage tasked with supporting them. Deep within the dungeon, as the hero party struggled against a swarm of monsters, Naruto shouted in frustration that they were taking damage as if they were completely defenseless. He furiously demanded an explanation, but the new mage insisted he was giving his absolute all with the enhancement magic fully active. However, Naruto instinctively retorted that Urus had always been far more effective. Another member stepped in to de-escalate, advising Naruto against clashing with his own ally and warning that he would surely get hurt if he let his guard down. In a desperate display of unity, the party combined their unique skills and magic, fighting with reckless abandon to overcome the monsters within. After successfully cornering the fearsome beast, Naruto immediately signaled Cryana to unleash her most powerful offensive magic. However, she was already preoccupied, using her restorative magic to treat another wounded comrade. With a swift lash of its massive tail, the creature sent Naruto skidding violently across the terrain. Meanwhile, a visibly exhausted Cranon revealed that their magical reserves were completely depleted. The newcomer questioned whether an antidote even existed, knowing that the lethal bacillus poison acted far too quickly for most to survive. Nard's lack of caution proved costly when he allowed the camouflaged monster's saliva to drip onto his bare hand, triggering a severe reaction and immediate swelling. In a state of desperation, he begged for an antidote, but McCraner concernedly revealed they had exhausted their supply of potions and insisted they evacuate the dungeon immediately. The new mage admitted that he would have packed more supplies had he realized the situation would be this dire. A short time later, Aris's party confidently made their way into the dungeon, while Yukina quietly hoped the heroes group wouldn't have any complaints once they saw them. Aris retorted that they didn't have the luxury of complaining given their current situation. At that moment, a beastly growl echoed through the dungeon, putting everyone on high alert. Advancing further, they realized the heroes' situation had grown even more grim, as a terrifying basilisk came into view. Oris admitted they should have arrived sooner, while Eros quickly activated his magic circle to unleash a flame-piercing shot. He unleashed a searing beam of light at the creature, rendering it completely motionless. Celia and Yukino once again praised his formidable skills, leaving his former party members completely speechless as they witnessed the scene. Krana accused him of being unfair, pointing out how he had slipped away from the party, only to reappear while demonstrating such powerful attack magic. Calmly mirroring the same harsh words Nardo had once used, he stated that the decision to fire him was final and left no room for explanation. He further explained that Flame-Piercing Shot was an advanced application of blessing magic, which he had first attempted following his banishment. He retrieved a vital healing potion from his inventory, noting it was exactly what they needed, and Nardo's face lit up with relief at the sight of the antidote. One might wonder if Urs had anticipated this situation and prepared those essential potions in advance. Aris explained that the gorilla dungeon was a secluded environment where magic consumption was heavy, and the monsters were mostly aggressive elementals. Furthermore, a shortage of specialized potions meant that lethal poison or paralysis could easily overwhelm them, as standard healing offered little protection against being left completely immobilized. Maintaining a serious expression, he admitted that this was his first time in the dungeon, making both the surroundings and the monsters' combat patterns a complete mystery to him. He further emphasized that they should exercise foresight in every action they took. He signaled for them to move ahead, clearly pointing out the exact location of the exit portal. Taken aback, he listened as Nardo spoke with genuine earnestness, emphasizing that he was truly counting on him. Aris never imagined he'd hear such words from Nardo, realizing that a harsh reality must have finally forced him to be so unexpectedly honest. With a firm and resolute tone, Aris assured him that he could leave everything in her hands. As they departed, Celia eagerly asked if Urus had already identified the specific types of monsters within the dungeon, but he instead apologized for involving them in such a dangerous situation. He was also deeply troubled to see the once legendary hero party in such a diminished state. Yukina grumbled, noting that their obsession with appearances had left them unable to safeguard their own comrades. Aris calmly countered, noting that the area was still familiar territory to him. Yukina was stunned to learn he was actually a member of that hero party, while Eurus realized he had never mentioned his past to her before. He promptly apologized to Yukina, concerned that his history might have caused her some discomfort. She calmly expressed her relief, explaining that she valued him as a fellow outsider and liked him for who he was, rather than just his status as a hero. Eris's face turned a deep red at her own words, and she quickly scrambled to clarify that she only meant she liked him as a person. Celia suddenly materialized between the two, catching them both completely off guard. Gesturing toward the path ahead, he explained that their destination contained a multitude of doors. As they made their way through the many doors, Silly questioned if it was safe to open them so recklessly, but Orissa shared her own perspective on the situation. Simultaneously, he activated his area scan skill, which immediately detected a swarm of dangerous monsters lurking just beyond the doors. Yukina reasoned that checking every single door would cost them too much time, suggesting they focus on moving forward for now. Advancing a bit further, they encountered an imposing door fitted with several keyholes. They realized the dungeon's boss was hidden deep within this formidable barrier, requiring a vast collection of keys to unlock the final door. Judging by the vast number of keyholes, it was clear that the keys had been hidden behind the various doors, with one tucked away inside each. Silly informed Alv that they had no choice but to clear the monsters within each gate, but as they began to move forward, Harus suddenly stepped in to stop them. After he accidentally tugged on Yukina's belt, she turned bright red and immediately warned him to be more careful about where he grabbed her. With 20 keys to collect, Eris pointed out that they couldn't afford to waste time on such a slow process. Realizing a direct approach was insufficient, he asked if there was a hidden method to unlock the doors. However, Eris pointed out that the situation was much simpler than they had initially assumed. Manifesting a powerful magic circle, he unleashed a massive burst of fire that blew the heavy door wide open with overwhelming force. Celia and Yukina were left stunned by his sudden reliance on brute force. But as the door swung open, a massive and terrifying dragon loomed before them. Wasting no time, Aristoclair moved to draw the dragon's attention toward himself. He quickly coordinated the two, directing Celia to strike from behind while Yukina provided expert support from the rear. The dragon unleashed a devastating torrent of fire from its massive jaws, but Eris reacted instantly, appearing behind the beast to deliver a precise flame-piercing shot. It was a formidable beast, yet not a single scratch marred its incredibly tough scales as Celia emerged from behind as instructed. She delivered a precise, heavy strike against the beast with her sword. As Eris praised her abilities, the dragon seized the opening to capture her while her guard was down. Panic-stricken, Eris prepared for a desperate follow-up attack, but Yukina's sharp voice rang out, commanding Celia to dodge. As Celia was pulled to safety, a powerful magical strike was unleashed against the dragon, successfully wounding the Dradenlay. Seizing the moment while the beast lay momentarily immobile, Eris lunged forward and delivered a precise strike, finally defeating the formidable dragon. News of their triumph echoed throughout the region as they stood outside, finally feeling the relief of having cleared the dungeon. Eris simultaneously cast his soothing repair and enchantment over them. Yukina proudly declared that Eris had set a historical record by clearing the challenging dungeon with such incredible speed. With a warm smile, he acknowledged that he hadn't reached this goal alone, crediting their victory to the seamless teamwork of all three members. He realized that without Cillia's precise strike against the dragon's scales, he never would have discovered its weakness. Cilia admitted that if it hadn't been for Yukina's timely intervention, she would have been completely torn apart. In a stuttered tone, Yukina humbly remarked that she hadn't done anything particularly remarkable, and that she had simply attacked from the back. Regardless, Iris still commended her for her much-needed assistance, leaving her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. He emphasized that magic consumption within this dungeon was exceptionally high. It was rare to find an adventurer capable of landing a powerful magic strike from such a significant distance. He gently took her hand to cast a recovery spell, and in return, she graciously expressed her heartfelt gratitude. Envious of their closeness, Cilia quickly wedged herself between them and clung to Eris, putting on a dramatic display of pain to demand his immediate attention. Observing the group, Yukina found herself laughing at the infectious, high-spirited energy of their gathering. She offered a silent prayer to her late parents, feeling a genuine sense of belonging with the group, when a figure suddenly materialized out of nowhere. With the village evacuation seemingly complete, she thanked her mothers, Celia and Yukina, for finally allowing her to step outside. She mischievously remarked that she could finally steal anything she wanted, only for Celia to promptly scold her for having such thoughts. Ares reflected on how someone who appeared so innocent could harbor such self-centered and dangerous thoughts. Observing their proximity, she playfully teased that Aruz had won over her mothers, though he bashfully clarified that their closeness was strictly for efficient mana recovery. She explained that while Celia might not have minded, his behavior was deeply disrespectful toward Yukina. Her face was flushed a deep red, yet he tried to convince himself it was simply the result of magical exhaustion. Yukina suddenly turned back to assure him she was all right, while Uraz clarified to Sulf that a notable distance still remained between him and the girl. Cilia pointed out his total lack of awareness, calling him hopelessly oblivious. He reasoned that his partnership with Yukina was strictly a strategic move to achieve their mutual goals. By successfully clearing the notorious gorilla dungeon, they brought themselves significantly closer to their ultimate mission of restoring peace to the world. He realized that to eventually overcome the Demon King, both he and his companions Celia and Yukina needed to keep pushing their limits. Nearby, the royal guards huddled in a quiet corner of the village, questioning why the heroes' party hadn't retreated yet and debating whether to report the situation to the palace immediately. The scene shifts to the royal palace, where King Floyd suggested that the kingdom appoint a new hero who would be a truly unique and ideal representative of their nation. The minister countered, arguing that even with the Alliance's heroes as a benchmark, finding adventurers capable of surpassing them would be a massive undertaking. Nevertheless, Floyd confidently asserted that the existence of these extraordinary individuals was already a proven fact. 3 days after clearing the treacherous gorilla dungeon, the Horus group visited a busy market, where the shopkeeper immediately recognized them as the heroes who had resolved the recent crisis. Leaning in, she asked if Eris was truly the former hero and if she was supposed to keep it a secret, making him realize that his past identity was already common knowledge. Celia requested 4 loaves of bread, prompting the store owner to compliment her striking appearance. When the question of whether she was Ero's girlfriend arose, he was left visibly flustered. But Celia calmly denied it and proudly introduced herself as the group's sword saint. Hearing this, the lady generously offered the entire bag of bread instead of just 4 pieces, causing Cilius's face to instantly light up with joy. Another merchant joined in, crediting the village's sudden revival to the hero's actions, and noting that even the local fruit had become noticeably juicier. Ever the scholar, Yukina explained how the dungeon's closure had stabilized the local magic, prompting the impressed vendor to ask about her identity. Eris stepped forward to proudly introduce her as the sage, crediting her for the group's recent success and leaving the vendor visibly impressed. He quickly presented her with his best produce as a gesture of thanks, prompting other merchants throughout the market to follow suit by showering them with gifts and sincere gratitude. Both Celia and Yukina appeared to relish the attention and praise they were receiving, while a local shopkeeper chimed in with further details. Observers pointed out that although Nardo's group had walked the village with confidence, they quickly retreated when help was actually needed, leading others to remark that Harris's party was far more dependable. The entire market expressed their sincere gratitude, thanking the group for their swift and decisive intervention. After finally navigating their way through the massive crowd, he let out a deep sigh of relief. Noticing this, Yukina asked him if he was feeling exhausted. Admitting that he wasn't used to such public attention, he felt a bit out of his element as they finally arrived at the guild house. The receptionist quickly apologized for the sudden interruption, but Urus assured her that 3 days of rest was more than enough before asking about the urgent matter at hand. Revealing she possessed an important letter addressed specifically to Eris, she instructed him to head toward the inner room. Eris realized his past as a hero was finally out in the open, and as the receptionist led them forward, Celia noted they were entering a restricted area. However, the receptionist stepped in to clarify that the room was actually their private office. She explained to the group that, following their quick success in the dungeon, an official letter from the capital had arrived the previous day. The message had arrived with such incredible speed that it could only have come by carrier pigeon, signaling its urgent importance. Seeing this, Eris asked who the sender was. She revealed the message was from King Floyd of the Male Kingdom, a disclosure that left him completely stunned. As he glanced over the letter, he saw it clearly stated that the king personally commended their rapid conquest of the dungeon. But the message also revealed that the allied hero party would be disbanded in favor of a new independent group serving the Male Kingdom. Most importantly, the decree announced that the new hero party's esteemed leader would be a heroic, pure-blooded, and self-reliant figure. Celia and Yukina were overjoyed by the news, feeling that their incredible feats in the dungeon were finally being officially recognized. Self soon arrived on the scene, cheerfully admitting that although she didn't know much about the subject, it certainly sounded impressive. While the receptionist felt Arrow's past achievements justified the recognition, they noted that receiving a direct nomination from the king was still an extraordinary honor. Celia questioned the necessity of forming a brand new party, wondering why they couldn't simply add Ares to their existing group instead. Yukina clarified that their group was actually a coalition, essentially serving as a multinational force funded by the surrounding nations. However, as the long period without any major clashes against the Demon King persisted, many nations became increasingly hesitant to provide financial support. The resulting financial shortage led to a predictable decline in the number of talented adventurers gathering there. To make matters worse, the situation had deteriorated significantly since the Gorilla Dungeon first appeared in Ari's hometown 6 years ago. With natural disasters now threatening every corner of the globe, nations shifted their focus from defeating the Demon King to prioritizing immediate relief efforts and domestic security. Furthermore, the receptionist explained that the allied hero party was disbanded following their recent dungeon retreat, as the king had decided to form a new, independent group specifically for the kingdom's protection. Silly finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, proudly declaring that Ares' time had come, though Ares hesitantly noted that was a very optimistic interpretation. He clarified that his primary objective remained the Demon King's defeat, viewing his time with the heroes' party as nothing more than a brief diversion. Nevertheless, the bitter memories of his former hero party remained incredibly difficult to forget. Noticing his hesitation, the receptionist asked if something was on his mind, only for Ores to shock her by inquiring if he could decline the prestigious nomination for the new hero party, specifically the role of leader. He clarified that he meant becoming a hero in a general sense, a revelation that left the entire room in stunned silence. Still visibly shaken, she stammered that defying a royal decree was completely unheard of, while Celia and Yukina urgently pleaded with him not to throw away such a prestigious opportunity. She urged him to take part, even though his reluctance was plain to see. At the same time, Eris struggled to find a way to articulate his complicated emotions to the rest of the group. Meanwhile, Gaelius Sheffield, Farah Forrest, Sils Estrella, and Miguel Bro had gathered within the grand audience chamber of the Male Kingdom. The king had personally appointed them as the newest distinguished heroes of the Male Kingdom. Following this, Floyd raised the topic of who would serve as the party leader. Gaelius offered quick reassurance, noting that his years of experience leading an A-rank party made him more than capable of handling the situation. Floyd calmly noted that the leader had already been selected despite their current absence. Gaelius quickly apologized for his slip of the tongue and inquired about the leader's identity, leading Floyd to reveal that it was none other than Eris Falray. Gaelius was visibly stunned to recognize him as the elite enchanter from the hero's former party. while Floyd casually mentioned the rumor that Auras had already cleared a guerrilla dungeon entirely on his own. Floyd proudly noted that even after retiring as a hero, Eris never stopped protecting the people, proving that his spirit and strength were truly worthy of such a prestigious title. Gallius broke into a cold sweat as he realized the immense authority the leader of the hero party commanded. He realized that operating under the king's authority would grant the leader immense influence, reaching far beyond the limits of their own party. Despite his years of leading successful parties and his widely recognized strength, Gallius couldn't understand why he was passed over, finding it deeply insulting to be placed under the command of a mere youth named Arrest on such a grand stage. He was certain that had he discovered the dungeon first, he would have been the leader instead of Russ, while an inquiry was made regarding whether the party leadership could eventually be reassigned. Floyd clarified that while he wasn't focusing on it now, the matter tended to resurface in court discussions every few years. He then revealed that Eris would reach the capital in a few days to officially join their ranks, ordering everyone to stay in Stamby until his arrival. Gallius grew increasingly resentful, believing the king was using the former party's retreat as a mere excuse to place far too much faith in Ares. He harbored a deep resentment, certain that if Eris were out of the picture, the king would have had no choice but to appoint him to the position. Leaving the capital behind, he resolved to eliminate Eurus, despite having no real understanding of the man's true character.